Hello everyone, and thank you very much for tuning in today. This conversation is amazing. We have Jamie on from Norwich Reptile Shed, and could be getting myself cancelled here. We talk on some really controversial topics. It's not so much a monitor podcast, but it's definitely a podcast that gets you thinking. Even a couple of times, Jamie even got me going, oh God, am I doing it right? Am I not doing it right? So yeah, thank you, Jamie. Thank you very much for your honesty. Thank you for your time and patience. Like I say, this is an amazing conversation. I'm really grateful that I don't script my podcast because it's more of a conversation than it is like me grilling him. But yeah, for the first 20 minutes, I'm a little bit, but that audio is completely fine. Everything's fine in the sense of just I freeze up, but it sorts itself out after about 20 minutes. And for the most part, the meat of this conversation is amazing. Like I say, it really gets you thinking about what we're doing as reptile keepers. So again, Norwich Reptile Shed, thank you very much, Jamie. I appreciate your honesty and appreciate your time and your wisdom and your know-how, to be honest. All of his links are in the description. Enjoy the conversation. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in today to the Captive Raptors podcast. I'm very excited about this conversation because there's a guy that I've been watching on YouTube for a couple of little bits now, and I really like your sort of ethos in the sense of how you set your enclosures up and really how you keep your species. So I'm really interested to dive into that. So Jamie, if you would like to introduce yourself and all the species that you keep.
Hi Paul, how you doing, mate? It's great to be on. My name's Jamie. I'm from the Norwich Reptile Shed. So I've got an Instagram, a YouTube channel where I'm kind of in the UK building custom reptile enclosures, trying to go big as possible, as naturalistic as possible, and just trying to take people along for the journey and basically show you how to do it. It seems to be how what's happening on the channel at the moment is just showing you how to do it, and hopefully inspire a few people to build nice big naturalistic enclosures. It's mainly snakes, so I'll quickly I can list off the snakes I've got. Behind me I've got sort of like a free viv setup of boigas. I've got Boiga Cyanea and Boiga Cynodon, a few of each, and then I've got Mr. Pine, the Northern Pine Snake. I've got another Northern Pine Snake as well. He's kind of like the main guy on the channel. A couple of false water cobras, the famous royal pythons. So they're in the nice big kind of zoo style enclosure that sort of got me slightly on the map, I suppose. Was building that, and then some other stuff as well. We've got Herman's tortoise, leopard geckos, massive assassin bug tank, a few Phelsuma species, line day gecko and a Standings day gecko, and a few smaller things as well. Got like a little rescue corn snake, a rescue beardy. We've got Penny, who's in like a barn style vivarium as well. So yeah, there's a bit of an eclectic mix. Quite a lot of your more basic reptiles, I suppose. Stuff that I took on when I was a lot younger and just never wanted to get rid of or anything like that. And so yeah, it's just a bit of an eclectic mix with a couple of cool big colubrids chucked in for fun as well.
Yeah. I'll be honest, the is it Sienna, the green cat snake?
Yeah,
I love those. I
they're
like
cool,
all
aren't they?
reptiles, but when it comes to snakes, there's a few that draw me. So I obviously Boiga, Dentophilia, or the Sienna, and then I really like Sanzinia, and I like false water cobras. So for snakes, you've got two of the three. So
Yeah.
when did you first start, one, getting into reptiles, and two, how old were you when you just started keeping reptiles?
It goes. So I was off and on a bit during my teens, but I can't really remember getting my first snake. It was a Mexican. No, it wasn't a Mexican. What was it? It was a king snake, and I was very young. My parents actually had some corn snakes at the time and a leopard gecko,
Oh,
so
cool.
they kind of sort of got me into that, and I had some newts and things like that. But I was definitely I must have been around 10 years old. So we're going back now sort of 24 years. And then kept sort of on and off for a bit during during my sort of teens when I got a full-time job. I think I gave up a few snakes, and then I kind of got back into it a few years later when I sort of fell onto my feet and sort of had a sort of solid place to live and things like that, and could get back into keeping exotics again. So off and on for about 24 years. It's been a while, but definitely hasn't been like this for 24 years in terms of this shed, which I'm happy to go into the details of that later. But the shed itself's 2 years old, so really, this way of keeping reptiles has only been for a few years.
Okay.
But up till that point, it was very standard.
That was going to be, so you've alluded to that, but we will go straight into the meat of this podcast straight away. So basically, everyone listening, we both want to, we've spoken off air, we both want to like get into ethics, like husbandry, welfare, and just the morality of keeping reptiles, and sort of, because I'm obviously monitor background, your reptile snake background. So we're just going to bounce off each other. But yeah, so that was going to be my question. And when did you start keeping the way that you keep? Because you can see your enclosures behind you. Obviously, they're incredible. And anyone who's watched your channel, I'll put the links in the description as well. But anyone who's watched your channel can see that like your royal python enclosure is bigger than the majority of my monitor lizard enclosures. So no one can discredit you for that. But what got you on that journey? Did you see something, or did something happen to you in your own collection where you went, I'm doing this wrong? Or did you, I don't know, sort of start listening to people online going, well, I'm clearly doing something wrong and they're doing something right? Or what happened?
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. Something must have snapped. So I spent a lot of years leading up to moving up to Norwich and building this shed. About 5 years before that, I was working in a zoo. I did sort of weekend work at a zoo in their reptile bit, built some enclosures. So I always enjoyed more zoo kind of quality enclosures and building stuff that I wanted the public to see, rather than maybe like a 4-foot vivarium in my house. So that I enjoyed that, and working in big enclosures with bigger animals. And I was managing an exotic sanctuary as well at the time, where we did have a few kind of big enclosures, some crocs and some big monitors. So something around that time must have snapped. And when we sort of looked into moving away from Essex, so we used to live in Essex, or the animals were kept in like a spare room, I tried to do the best I could. I tried to buy the biggest enclosures you could buy, or you could get made back then. Sort of like 5-6 foot. I think I had a 7-foot vivarium, but I had to try and make actually bring it into my house, which was a nightmare. But yeah, something snapped. And when I said let's move, me and my wife decided we'll move to Norwich. One of the key factors to where we wanted to live was it had to have a garden, and it had to have something where we can put animals in the garden, so we can build that for them. And so I can't really pinpoint it to something, but I must have just stood in my reptile room at one point and just got like, guys, I know I've done it because I can remember saying it, but I was like, guys, we're going to build you like awesome enclosures. Just give me a bit of time, give me a few years, and it's going to be awesome. But yeah, as to why I did that, I don't know. I do wear my heart on my sleeve when it comes to these animals. Some of them have been with me since I got back into reptile keeping, sort of my early 20s. We sort of, it's just, yeah, I don't really know what happened, but I just wanted to I didn't even want to do YouTube back then. When I built this place, I wasn't going to build a YouTube channel, because otherwise I would have filmed myself building it, because that would have been the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And I built a lot of the enclosures before doing YouTube. So it wasn't that. I just wanted, at the time I wanted to walk into my own reptile house. I'd done the zookeeping for a bit. I knew that I couldn't give up my job as a lift engineer to then go and work in a zoo for multiple reasons. Even though I'd love to, if I could do it all again, I would just go straight into that, and I wouldn't have an engineering background as much. But yeah, I wanted basically to be able to, you know, do the day job of lift engineering, which then sort of paid for the reptile house in the back garden. And I wanted to be able to walk into my garden and feel like I was in a good reptile house in a zoo. That's always what inspired me. And the Royal Python Vivarium was inspired from the way I saw them at London Zoo when I was a kid, when they actually had royal pythons in kind of like a tree setting. They actually had them in trees, like sort of 4 foot off the ground.
Oh, cool.
You know, from that point, I knew I could keep royal pythons like that. I don't think they do that anymore. I don't think it's
No,
there
I
because
don't think they
I've
do.
looked at loads of videos since of tours, and I haven't seen them in there. But I know other zoos have done it. But for me, when I was a teenager, I think I was probably a really young teenager. I saw that and that just stuck in my head. And I was like, "There's, you know, royal pythons sitting like tree pythons," and
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, "I can do that." Yeah, and
No,
that's just stuck
that's
in my head
magic.
ever since.
That's magic. The fact
Mm.
that there's a lot to unpack there, and I'll unpack it all. But just on that last point, that's magic. The fact that 20 odd years ago, or however long, you saw this like almost an epiphany, a vision for the future, and now here you are living
Mm.
it. You know what I mean? So for me,
Yeah,
like hats off to you, because regardless of the rest of the stuff which you've got, which is incredible in its own right, the fact, like for me, same thing. I saw 21 years ago, saw a picture of a green tree monitor, and I was like, one day, and now I have three. So it's sort of like looking
yeah,
back at your inner child and going, do you know what? Like, yeah, you did it. So hats off to you.
yeah,
But that
definitely. I think.
on
Oh,
London
thanks.
Zoo as well, I know a guy who's working on the new reptile house there. I don't know when it's going to be done. I don't know what's going in there either, but they've got a he showed me a picture of a massive I don't know if it's a Japanese giant salamander or not, but basically like a hellbender giant salamander enclosure, and it's like eye level.
Yep.
The water is like eye level, so when you're walking in, you'll be like eye level, and obviously it's only shallow water, but
Oh,
they've set it
awesome.
up, and it looks amazing. So I was like, oh my god, when it opens, like we're gonna have to go there. But
Yeah,
yeah, so similar.
yeah,
Sounds like
definitely.
you've got a similar background to me, because I haven't kept reptiles as you've kept reptiles pretty much nearly as old as I am, so I haven't kept reptiles that long. And my parents weren't supportive. They never let me have pets, so I went crazy, like I feel like most reptile keepers do. So I moved out and I brought everything I could, and I was very much guilty of going, what's the smallest enclosure I can keep this in, because I want it and I need it and I want it. And then I got divorced
Yeah,
and I had to sell everything, moved back in with my parents, and then I moved out again. And I had that epiphany. Then I was like, I'm not getting into the same. I'm just going to go down a straight line. I love monitors, and the last couple of years I've been going less is more and bigger enclosures are better, especially for varanids. But what I like
yeah,
about you and your stuff is that you have snakes, and the majority of people keep snakes in boxes, and normally not even opaque boxes. And
yeah.
here we are, when you've got like what 3, 4, 5 foot tall enclosures, or 5 foot for your royal or whatever it is, and
6, yeah, 6 foot
there
that
you go.
is.
So that's taller than me. So you have a royal enclosure taller than me. My question is why? Like, obviously, you've said you can't, and I'm all for it. So before we unpack this, I hats off to you. I admire you 100%. But obviously, you say you don't know why. But let's just unpack some stuff together now. Why didn't you go, do you know what? I could have 50 snakes in drawers. And obviously, you've said, same as me, you wanted to walk into that reptile house. And when we just moved, we're only renting, but when we moved, it had to have a big room to fit all my varanids in. It just had to. So I'd
Yeah.
walk into a house and I'd be like, oh, that wall isn't 8 foot flat, so I can't put a Viv there. It's no good. And the estate agents are like, what? And I was like, don't worry, it won't fit the lizards. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
why don't you have snakes in drawers is my question. And I know the answer, but let's just go into it. And what's your opinion, as much as you want to go into it, about the internet hating us both? Because I don't agree with racks in any circumstance. I'll put my opinion out there first.
Mhm.
Even in the sense of
Yeah. Yeah.
quarantine, I don't agree with them. But I'm not a snake man. So as a snake guy, what are the benefits in keeping the way that you keep, and why do you keep the way that you keep?
Yeah, definitely. So I think you can break it up into two, really. I didn't sort of, you know, however I got my snakes, some of them I've purchased, very few that I've purchased, others that sort of came into the animal sanctuary and I took with me out of the animal sanctuary. But the reason, I suppose the main reason why I myself want to do that is because I want to see that animal. I want to see it like I would in a reptile house. So I want to see that animal in a naturalistic environment, acting in a naturalistic way, and exhibiting that kind of behavior. And you can't do that in a tub. You can't do it in a rub or in a rack system. And I'm the same as you. I'm not I'm against racks. I don't see the point in them. Well, I do. I see why people see the point in them.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
for me, I couldn't say, I've got loads of pets. Here they are in a tower of
In a drawer, yeah.
drawers. You can't see them. So yeah, for me, it's always been like, this is a pet snake, or pet, any pet exotic animal. I
Yeah,
want to see that animal. I've spent money on it.
exactly, yeah.
Even if you boil it down to that simple fact,
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
spent
yeah.
money on this animal. Why would I not want to see it? But yeah, to me, it comes down to the whole, like, an animal and the environment. I love creating the environments for the
Yes.
animals, and I like seeing that displayed. So for me, it hasn't even crossed my mind to put racks in or anything like that. And this is it does it when we had the sort of thinking about the size of the reptile shed, I actually scaled, did a scale drawing of the shed on paper and worked out every enclosure, and I knew that I could get, behind me you can see I've got obviously the three tall boiga and then going
Yeah.
on from that I've got 6 foot, they're 6 by 2.5 by 3 foot tall. I know I can then get 3 sets of those in there, and then I'm against the wall. So the whole thing was planned out, for the animals that I've got. So it didn't even cross my mind that I could fit 100 more animals in here, and I could easily, I could fill this place up with not even racks, just
Yeah.
4x2s. I
Yeah.
mean, it's 30 foot long, so I could fit dozens of 4x2s in here, and cram a load of snakes in here as much as I want. But that doesn't interest me. It interests me sort of standing up there and being like looking at an enclosure and being in the enclosure. And that's the Royal Python Viv is a big one for that, because it is such a kind of epic enclosure, especially with the tortoise in front of it as well. Like, it's this big kind of thing that you couldn't really do it in your house very easily, but in a shed, it's or in this room, it's quite easy to do. But it does feel like it's as close as I can be to having my own kind of reptile house. And it boils down to just seeing that animal act naturally. And I know they survive and they eat and they breed. Most importantly, they breed in the racks. But that
Yeah.
for me isn't why I started keeping snakes.
No, I agree, and I'm glad you said about the natural, because the way I see it is, I hope one day I will, but the reality is the animals that I keep, I'm probably never going to see in the wild. So if I can set up an enclosure, for example, with some branches splayed over a big water feature to be able to see a monitor splayed over the water feature, or with a couple of branches so I can again watch them splay and cryptically bask, or like the other day I fed my mangrove monitor a massive fish that she actually had to pull apart. Silly stuff like that. That's why I do it. Like my stuff, I'm slowly transitioning to making sure everyone has custom backgrounds, and I'm down. So like for me, have you got a dog or a cat?
Yeah, yeah,
So
we haven't done that in halves either. But yeah,
no, but
we've got dogs and cats.
so I don't have a dog or a cat, but I say to people, my mum's got 4 dogs. So if someone said to you like how much for your dog, you'd tell them to like F off, because dogs are like your kids. They're invaluable. They're a member of the family, and I want my reptiles to be the same. So all of my reptiles, bar a few, so I've got 24 lizards, maybe they're thereabouts, a bit less because I had babies and I've just sold them. But yeah, so let's say 20 for the story, 17 of which there's no monetary figure I'd take. The other 3, I'm like, no. They're clearly not for me. As much as I love them and I adore them and I really enjoy them, there's going to be someone out there who's the same as me that wouldn't have a monetary tag on them, like my mangrove or my tree monitors or my peach throat. Like you couldn't buy them off me for any amount of money in the world. And that's how I think we should be with reptiles. And I think people, the problem is with YouTube and social media, people see the glorification of racks and see the glorification of minimalistic keeping in the sense of, look how many animals you can keep in, like you say, a 30-foot shed in 4-foot vivs. I've got it's probably not 30 foot, but it's probably 20-ish, 20, 25 foot by 14-foot conservatory that I'm in with all my reptiles in. So yeah, the monitors I could even lizards monitors I could keep in here if I kept them all in 4-foot vivs. I think people see that and the collector in us comes out. And I think, how do I unpack this? I think people haven't seen the beauty of an animal acting naturalistically because they've been too long keeping them sterile. And then people get so high up on a horse because they watch big YouTube channels that promote obese snakes in tiny boxes. So then they go, well, that's how it's supposed to be. And then, like you say, because they breed and because they eat and because they, I don't know, don't die, people see that as they're living their best life. And I see it time and time again. I get people message me and I tell them how to keep their monitor. And I don't attack people because if I say to someone like, oh fuck it, we'll swear. I said if you're fucking keeping your lizard, if I say to someone, if you're fucking keeping your lizard like that, then it's gonna fucking die, you fucking idiot. Then they're just gonna go, whoa, and then not listen to me. But if I go, look, I've made these mistakes. I recommend you need to do this because then you'll be able to see this behavior and that behavior. Then people are more receptive to listen. So I'm going to address this into a question again, rather than just rambling on it. But why do you think the masses? We're not talking about breeders because obviously breeders just want as much money as possible. And we'll get onto that in a second. But why do you think even Joe Blogs, who has 3 corn snakes, why do you think they'll just do a 3x2x2 aspen ceramic or a heat mat and then 1 plastic hide? Why do you think people do that?
I mean, I honestly think if you walked into a reptile shop a couple of years ago, we're not talking about your good reptile shops, but I mean, if I walk into any reptile shop around here, there isn't going to be many bags of, not that I'm buying bioactive stuff in sacks anyway, but if you go into a reptile shop, the first thing you see is aspen, orchid bark, all this stuff. So I don't think we're still not promoting that as well as we can. A 3x2 foot vivarium. I think if you went online and bought a Viv Exotic vivarium,
it's like 80 quid, yeah, if that, yeah.
Yeah, they're cheap. They don't make them bigger than 4 foot, I believe. I'm not
No, I don't think they
mega up to
do.
date with
No,
that stuff.
I think it's just 4
I don't
foot,
think they do. Yeah,
No.
so you can see why people, without going, really diving deep and finding, channels like ourselves, you can see why people would just sort of touch on the surface. You bring up a website that sells reptile equipment, the first thing you're going to see is ceramic heat emitters, and you're going to go, well, I can have that on at the day and the night. That's easy. That the reptile shops sell them, so why would they not be? That's fine. Of course, that's fine. And while I'm here, I might as well pick up a bag of aspen.
Yeah.
So I'm not blaming the reptile shops, but I do think we still aren't there in terms of like public knowledge about how to go naturalistic and go big. I think you've got to kind of have a bit of a dive and really do some research to find people like us that are keeping stuff differently and showing you that it has benefits and it works and it's much more enjoyable as well. I don't know. I've sort of fallen in love with a lot of my snakes just from looking at them in the enclosures that I've built, and I've just sort of looked at them and gone, "Oh man, that's so cool!" Like I would have never walked into my reptile room back when I lived in Southend, and looked at my pine snake in a 4x. Well, I actually think I had him in a 5x2 at the time, and if he was basking, and just laying out there basking in, in his viv, I would have gone, well, that's Mr. Pine, he's out. But
Yeah,
now he's
yeah.
laying across this log, or he's in a log that's like, covered in sort of like moss, and it looks like a little bit of a forest, as much as I can try and, to recreate that kind of that forest setting. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's awesome. And like, I've had him for, 15 years, and I'm
Yeah.
still looking at him going, man, that's so cool. And I never used to do that when I first got him. I used to just put him in a vivarium and just kind of go, yeah, that's that. So there's definitely that. I don't know. It's getting that across to people. Enjoy them. You can imagine that animal in a natural habitat, and then I think you'd get more out of it personally. I don't think I'm the only one here that thinks that, but yeah, you definitely get more out of that by seeing that.
No, I agree. And there's nothing better, in my opinion, than having a vision in your head, setting the enclosure up to said vision. For example, you go out. I go to my parents' house. They've got like an acre of land with nothing but like oak trees, so I know it's all good, and I know it's not dirty, and there's no pollutants or pesticides. And I'll see like a branch twisting up. And if I remember, I'll put a picture in of my tree monitor, my baby tree monitor enclosure, which is just here. But there's a bit of oak and it does that. And then it shoots straight up and it's all covered in live moss. And I went, oh, just imagine. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. I was like, just imagine like it and it snakes around like that. And then imagine her like climbing vertically, like my little baby, climbing vertically up it. And then I did it. And then she did exactly how I imagined.
Awesome. Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, this is why I like. And then I told, I think I said it on Liam's podcast, Reptiles and Research. I said I had a tree monitor, still got him, but I had the tree monitor, and he was in an okay enclosure. But like you say, walk past, oh, that's Kermit. Oh, that's Kermit. Oh, that's Kermit. And I resonate 100% with that. And I redid his enclosure, and all of my enclosures at the moment are a bit rubbish purely because I moved about a month ago. It's not an excuse, but it is an excuse. And I had to empty every single enclosure to be able to move them because you're not lifting the enclosures, and half of them I had to dismantle. So basically, everyone got reset back up, basically just to get them back in. Which I've slowly been tinkering. I'm slowly upgrading everyone, and I'm slowly getting on with custom backgrounds. But I did the tree monitor enclosure, and I imagined these branches, and I imagined how he would interact. And it also helps knowing your animal because you know their behaviors and their mannerisms, and you go, oh, he would like this. And then I put a array of like 6 different branches splayed across the basking spot, and I was like, I just know that he's going to come and fan himself out across all of them and have to like. And sure enough, I come in one day and he's just there, and I'm like, oh my god,
that's awesome, isn't it? Yeah.
But I think as well, another problem with naturalist keeping is it's not cheap, in the sense of there are shortcuts, and we can go into them, like getting your wood from outside, as long as you know where you're getting it from, going to, like, if you're in the UK, B&Q or Homebase, and getting topsoil and kids play sand, and you can get like a massive bag of sphagnum moss from B&Q for like £8 and all silly stuff like this. But for example, let's just say, because I don't do it anymore because there's too many on the market, so I'm breeding ackies, but I'm not incubating eggs. But I breed my ackies. My ackies, just look at them now. They're in a 6x3 enclosure. And that's pretty much where my female lives by herself. And then my male goes in there for half the year, and then he comes out. It's relatively naturalistic, deep soil, halogen basking spot, deep heat basking spot, LEDs, UVB, multiple climbing branches, several cork tubes. At the moment, it's filled with leaf litter. All of that cost me time, money, and energy, which is fine. I enjoy it. But to be able to produce ackies at that level and then put babies in the same size enclosure, well, same setup enclosure, but minimalized, because obviously they're a lot smaller, and then raise the babies, feed them a diverse diet, and feed them regularly, and feed them supplemented properly, it's not cheap. So my babies are going to cost more than someone who has ackies and raises their babies on puppy pads or paper towel. But the problem is with the reptile hobby, I find, is we're all here, not all of us, but we're all here going, we want ethical keeping, and we want better husbandry, and we want this. But then when it comes to paying for your animal, you go, oh, that's a bit expensive, isn't it? And you don't support the people. And then, like you say, because you look at fish keepers and they'll spend, I don't know, 40 quid on a fish and have it in like a £700 tank with better lighting than we've got. So I don't,
I guess I think people just do it because people as a general, we all want something for nothing. I'm guilty for messaging a breeder and going, for example, let's just say it's 200 quid. I'm like, would you take 180? Like we're all guilty of it, but I think we need to normalize, because like, who are we to say what an animal's worth, and who are we to depict what someone wants to sell their animal for? For example, let's just say I tried to sell one of my tree monitors for $5,000. It's not going to sell, but it's my prerogative to put my animal up at that price. Doesn't make it worth that. It's only, an animal's only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. But people don't want to pay a premium for someone who is doing it properly. People want to buy from someone in the snake world who's got it in a rack, who can mass produce and can sell it 25, 30 quid cheaper. Why do you think that people, because let's be honest, myself included, like I say, I bid people down. Why do you think people are penny pinchers, basically, in the sense when it comes not necessarily you and I, but we're not going to anybody, we're talking in a general spectrum. Because even I'll walk into a reptile shop and I'll go 25 quid for an LED bulb. I'm like, F that, and then I'll go and get a cheaper. I'll get the same thing, and I'm a Sparky, so for me it's a little bit easier because I get lighting. So I'm not saying don't support reptile shops, and I'm not saying spend loads of money when you don't have to. But even in certain areas, like you say, because you can get a custom enclosure built 6x2x2 for, I think the cheapest one I've looked at is about 200 quid. So it's not loads, but then you get a 4x2x2 for say 100 quid. And if you look secondhand, you'll get it even cheaper.
Of course.
Why do you think people go, we'll just get the 4x2, we'll just get the heat mat? Like, because obviously you and I, and also like, what behaviors have you seen? So we'll just pick a species, or two species to narrow in on, because obviously you have got an eclectic collection. But why do you think people cheap out? And then what behaviors and benefits have you seen from people, from your animals being in better conditions with better lighting and better enclosures and better enrichment?
So I think it all boils down to money at the end of the day, doesn't it? It's people are shopping with their wallet as much as any other industry. I wouldn't, I choose to go to get some vegetables from Lidl rather than Waitrose because times are a bit tough at the moment. So
yes, exactly,
and that works the same. Unfortunately, that works with reptiles, and then double unfortunately, reptiles are really good at surviving. And that is their biggest downfall. I've always said this, it's their biggest downfall. A bearded dragon will survive, with a crappy lamp, a crappy UV, and, living on play sand, and a rock, and a bowl full of mealworms because, the owner's too scared to throw anything else in there, and they'll survive and they'll live forever, or not ever, but
they'll go 10 years.
They will, and a corn snake will do the same with a heat mat in a 2-foot viv, and living on aspen with a but they do survive, and that is their biggest problem. And people are understandably for most things, but annoyingly for trying to push the hobby forward and create really cool big enclosures, it's more expensive. And I'm I suppose I'm lucky in a way. I'm not a millionaire. I'm just an engineer earning a standard wage for an engineer, but every penny I owe, like every penny I get, is spent on my animals. I'm not normally left with anything, and obviously I hope that it shows. But I could have easily just built sort of 4-foot vivs and put one heat lamp in there, and the animals would be in there and they'd be surviving. But it's an unfortunate world where if you want to advance your keeping and try and provide the best things possible, then it's going to cost you more money. And that just boils down to this whole, I haven't got money to spend. People have got that snake, and I've not argued, but I've spoke to people before where they're asking me for advice with their snakes and setups and stuff, and I'm sort of listing these things off, And in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is getting expensive because I'm throwing this all at you at one time. A shade dweller and a better thermostat and lamps, and then you obviously need your Guardian lamps and all this sort of stuff to when they're saying I've got a heat mat and it's under 2 inches of soil and I'm wondering why it's not getting hot, and I'm like, well, do this. By the way, it's going to cost you like 300 quid. And people just aren't going to spend that. And that is, I think it's annoyingly, and it's really easy for someone like me and you to say with a big sort of, well, not big, but a fairly good collection of animals. It's easy to say, get one animal and concentrate on that one animal and make that as good as you can be. Spend all your money on that. Like if I could, I'm sort of lucky that I am doing this and I'm throwing money at it, and I was up till sort of recently anyway, really trying to push forward and build this place as quickly as possible. But if I could start again and I only had 1 or 2 snakes, then we sort of need to get the point across where less is more, and like looking after one animal correctly and throwing as much money as you can at it in terms of the best equipment you could provide. That's the better mentality to have towards keeping animals. And unfortunately with reptiles it doesn't work that way. And like you said, with fish keepers, people are spending thousands of pounds on like marina, like especially like sort of marina stuff and things like that, and it's just the norm. But if I put a £10 raw python in a 5 by 6 foot vivarium, people are going, you're an idiot. And I was saying this with Liam. I did a podcast with Liam recently. It's not out yet, but it did sort of dawn on me. I did like a barn vivarium. We didn't brush on the barn vivarium too much, but I have done like this sort of barn style vivarium, and I've always loved barn style vivariums. I used to do them in zoos, and like, contrary to belief, it wasn't because of a snake discovery video where some guy built one. I was building them like 15 years ago. I wasn't the first. Zoos have been doing them for years. So I always wanted to build a barn vivarium. And my albino black rat snake was a perfect candidate for a barn vivarium. She's like, I obviously went to town. It's a 6 foot long vivarium. It's 3 foot tall, same as all the other stacks that I build, the 6 by 3 by 2.5 foot. So it's all the same. Hundreds of pounds of equipment in there. Instead of a custom background, it's more of a tin background to look like a side of a barn or a roof, like corrugated tin. Antique apple cart, boxy things in there, and loads of rocks and an old iron wheel and stuff like that. It's a £25 snake.
A lot of effort.
I brought a £25 snake when I was really young. It was a hatchling. It was basically sold, the same price as a corn snake back then. Actually, I think it was probably about £10 more than a corn snake. But yeah, I went to all that effort. I'm not saying, I'm this amazing person, but, go into all that effort and it's paid off, because I now stand there and go, that's so cool. But I've had that snake for years. I've had her since a hatchling, and now she's a full grown, gigantic, black rat snake, and they get quite big. So she's a big girl. And when she sits on top of that apple crate thing, basking under, I've got like a Reptile Systems T5 UV in there. And she basks under that. And I'm just like, that's so cool. That's so cool. And like, what we said earlier, I didn't used to think that. When she was living in a 4x2, I never looked at her and went, that's so cool, because it was standard sort of stuff. But yeah, it's just getting that mentality over to people, isn't it? Just saying, just do everything you can for that one animal. That is the most important thing. It's not the it's not like spend as little as you can on that equipment, and then you can buy 5 more snakes or 5 more lizards, or that one lizard, the next lizard, and it's trying to shake that. But there's this kind of collector thing, and we're obviously
I was going to say, you make a good point. Like I hadn't thought about it. So you've even got me going, what a twat, because
I'm the same.
No, you're 100% right, and I think it's very important to be accountable. because if you're not self-aware as a keeper, then your animals will suffer.
Yeah.
And I did obviously know it, but I say to people like less is more, blah blah blah. You have 20 monitors, Paul. Like, shut up.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the problem I've got. I can't say I can, it's hard for me to say less is more when my whole life is these animals, and I've surrounded myself with these animals. But
Yeah, no, you
but
are right.
It's a gradual thing, and then this whole shed has been a big push into doing it as quickly as possible. But
This
I
is
tried
it.
to
Yeah,
make no illusion that these animals were in 4, 5, 6 foot vivariums that I could bring into my flat at the time, which were the big. Like, I've still got some 5. I think they're 5 foot by 2 foot, and then I went 18 inches high because I knew I could get a couple more
yeah.
stacked up. I knew I could fit at least one more rather than the 2 foot. And that doesn't, the 18 inches to the 2 foot doesn't make much of a difference, but it's a crap size vivarium. And I look at it
Yeah.
now and I can't wait. I've done this 3 times now where I've taken them out into the garden and I've just lobbed them out the door. And I'm like, I'm not selling them. I'm not giving them away. They're going, and I enjoy taking them to the tip. And I'm waiting for the guy at the tip to be like, oh, we'll take that. We'll put that in the shop. And I'm like, too late, bang, smash it. And and I was like that up till I'm still like that with some of my animals. I just can't physically build and buy plywood as quickly as I want, so but those animals still have, they've still got a T5 fixture in there. I'm still trying my hardest, but obviously it's not the 6 foot ones that I'm currently building. And every time I come in here, I'm kind of like, oh man, come on, Jamie, sort that out. Why hasn't the price of plywood gone down a bit?
Yeah. It's so I'll make my point and tell a story quickly to sort of back the point up. So let's just say you're watching this podcast and you have 5 reptiles, say 4 of which you're happy with how you're keeping them, 1 of which could do with an upgrade, but then you've just seen, I don't bloody know, a frilled dragon for 100 quid on Pre-Loved. And you've got, oh, well, I've only got 300 quid spare. But let's just say you've got 600 quid. Let's just say. So you've got 100 quid for the lizard and you've got 500 quid for the setup. Great. That's great. But what I think we need to promote from where we're standing is, so obviously your priority right now, like you've just said, is wait, build bigger enclosures for the animals you've got. Whereas I used to be guilty of going, this needs an upgrade, but this is for sale. And then you neglect what you have because, like you say, redoing an enclosure or even something as simple as putting leaf litter in the enclosure and falling in love with your animal again will save you so much money in the sense of trying to fill a hole with a new species and a new species and a new species. There was a guy, he messaged me recently, it's probably about 6 months ago now. He messaged me and said, hey man, any chance you can get help me with my Ackie monitor? I said, yeah, cool, no worries. So he messaged me and I said, I need to see some pictures of the setup, I can't help. And he was like, no hate. I was like, I'm not going to give you hate. Anyway, long story short, he had an adult Ackie monitor in a 45 Exoterra. For you American people, I think that's 18, or 24. Can't remember, tiny one. 24 is 2 foot, so it'd been 18. So 18 Exoterra or 45 Exoterra. I was like, right, okay. What's your basking spot? He said 30 degrees. And ideally for an Ackie, you want 26 to 28 on the cool side, let alone the hottest point in the enclosure being 30 degrees. So I made all these. I said, right, first things first, you need a minimum of a 4 foot. I think you need bigger, but for this instance, a 4 foot would have been ample. He said, I don't have any money. I said, all right, okay. Your first priority is to save. I don't care if it takes you 6 months. If you're dedicated to this animal, save and buy a bigger enclosure, because a bigger enclosure with absolutely nothing in it is better than a tiny enclosure that's completely wrong. So I gave him a few tips on like how to create a higher basking spot so at least it could get to the right temperature, how to create a microclimate for a bit of humidity. So I basically said to him, for those who are interested, wedge up a bit of slate up high so at least it gets hot and the lizard can get closer to the basking spot and get hot, and then that would also defer the heat from lower so the enclosure doesn't overheat. And then I said just buy some sphagnum moss, put as much soil in there as you can, put some sphagnum moss under a bit of cork, and at least then that creates like a fake burrow. Anyway, I gave this guy so much time. He ended up like giving me hate on YouTube, said I made him cry, all this other stuff, but we won't go into that because it's irrelevant. Fast forward 2 or 3 months, he messages me from a different account, but same guy. Because he was like, "Hey man, I'm the guy with the Aki," like jogged my memory. And I was like, "Oh, cool. How you doing? Like, how's the Aki?" And he said, "Yeah, good." Instantly, next message, false water cobra. And I was like, "Okay." And then he was like, "I've just got this." And I was like, and I literally just said, "How much was it?" And he said, "I think it said 150 or something like that." And I went, "Okay." And then I went for his profile, and a recent picture of his Aki monitor is in the exact same shitty enclosure that it was in 3 months ago. So the man's just spent 150 quid on a snake when that would buy you a secondhand 5-6 foot enclosure.
Yeah.
And I think
Do you know-
people doing that is, for me, like, it's disgusting.
Yeah, I think we need to. We'll have a talk about this after the podcast because I think we're talking to the same person, and
Okay.
I think some of the advice that I gave maybe many months ago has made him potentially go, "I'm going to talk to Paul," because
Okay.
doesn't talk to me anymore.
No, he doesn't really talk to. I haven't been rude, but I've just ignored his messages.
Yeah.
So if he's watching this, shout out.
We're on to you. I'm just plugging my laptop in. I didn't realize.
No, it's cool. But like for me, don't get me wrong. Like I don't want people to think that I'm condescending or coming across condescending, because I'm the first person to go, look, like one of my tree monitors right now is in way too small of an enclosure. I'll be honest, purely because his enclosure broke when I moved. Haven't brought a new one yet. If I'm honest, I've got the money sat aside, but the enclosure he's in at the minute, in my head, I'm like, do you know what? He'll be all right for a couple of months. I want to get through Christmas. I'm self-employed. I'm not going to earn any money through Christmas. And in the UK right now, everything's costing so much. And it's horrible and rubbish. But as soon as January comes and I'm through this year, the first thing I'm doing is buy him a new enclosure. And it's not acceptable, and it's not. So I don't want to sit here and go, oh, it's okay, because it's not. I don't want to. Don't come and bash me for it. I feel sick looking at it, and that's the truth.
But like you said, it broke when you were moving it. So,
but then it's,
you know,
but by like, I don't want to be like, oh, he's got it in too small of an enclosure, when I know I do. But I will upgrade that tree monitor, and I know I will, and it'll be in a bigger enclosure and a better enclosure than what it was in before. And that's going to be a priority. You know what I mean? It's not.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, I'm going to buy a false water cobra. And admittedly, the enclosure I'm going to have to buy for the tree monitor is probably going to cost me like 400 quid. But if I was to buy, let's just say, another tree monitor, which is going to cost me 1,000, be the same instance as the guy I'm talking about, people would be like, Paul, like, what are you doing? Like, you've got this, you know? So you need, that's like I say, you need to, like you said, like, how can we sit here with all our animals and say less is more? Because you have to be self-aware, and I don't want to be like a hypocrite and go, oh, you shouldn't do this when I do it. But I think the difference is knowing where the line is, because the problem is with people is everyone has a line, and you see this in what people, for example, animals they deem fit to eat. So every animal, in my opinion, I'm a very spiritual person. Every animal, regardless of what it is, including trees and plants, they're sentient, because I'm spiritual and all this other crap. So they're all sentient, they're all conscious, they're all aware, we're all part of one universe and whatever. But you see it, like, for example, people, they'll go, like, say pescatarians, they go, I don't want to eat animals because they're cute and friendly, but fish are disgusting, so I'll happily eat them. And I'm not a vegetarian, and I've got no issue with vegetarians. I'm just making the point of people have this line. And some people, I saw an advert, I think it was like Aldi, which is American people. It's like a cheap supermarket over here. They were going to start selling like deep fat fried crickets or locusts, grasshoppers. And so many comments on Facebook were like, oh, this is disgusting. This is disgusting. This. And I said about this on Liam's podcast, and he said, well, it's no different to prawns. And I said, well, it's true, but prawns are prepared. If you imagine a shell-on whole prawn, people aren't going to buy them because you're taking the humanity out of it. People are, oh, it's gross. But then when it's just a little pink tail, no one cares.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making towards the reptile keeping is reptiles, for the masses of keepers, they seem to have this hierarchy. So you get like your iguanas and your monitors, which seem to be at the top of the tree, and they need huge enclosures, and they need masses of enrichment, and they need all this lighting. And then obviously you get like bugs at the bottom, which people just keep in like tubs. But then where and how, because you've got monitors all the way up here, then you've got, for example, like, I don't know, let's just say fruit beetles all the way down there. How come snakes aren't like here next to monitors and they're like all the way down there, just, you know? And like, I think people just sit with yourself for 5 minutes. If you keep an animal in a drawer for 5 minutes, sit with yourself and think about it. Like, how is that okay? Like, if I kept a dog in a crate for 22 hours a day, everybody would come.
Cool.
Everyone would come. And like, let's not, again, let's be self-aware. I keep lizards in boxes. Doesn't matter if it's a huge box or a tiny box. And half of my stuff is wild caught. I keep a wild animal in a box. And that's the reality of it. Reptile keepers will understand this in the sense of it's the way that it is. But then I guess I'm addressing now people that aren't reptile keepers, because the hobby is under fire. And you'd see, I'm looking at my peach throat enclosure right now, custom backgrounds, 5-6 different species of plants, leaf litter, deep substrate. Like, I can even see like a little woodlouse right now from here, all like microfauna. I can see the peach throat out basking. The colors are looking incredible, all the lighting. Someone would look at that and go, oh, that's a slice of batanta. That's quite nice. But then you get these animals in drawers and people go, what are they, shoes? So how important do you think, I'm going on a bit of a rant, so sorry. But how important do you think naturalistic keeping is for the future of the reptile hobby, but not in the eyes of reptile keepers?
I think, I think it should be as important, you know, the most important thing. And that's my way of looking at it. It like you said, like I said earlier, it does boil down to the fact that annoyingly animals or reptiles survive in these boxes. And they're not, you know, if more of them are maybe keeling over after a couple of years, maybe we'd do something about it and we'd have a different approach to it. But it is the only way, and it's the only way I feel comfortable about, you know, captive animals. And I'm, you know, I'm a firm believer in good zoos. I don't like bad zoos. You know, every now and again, you know, captive animals sort of do tug on my heartstrings a bit, and you know, and it upsets me seeing an animal in a box. We can't make a box big enough. It shouldn't be in a box, essentially. Do you know what I mean? And like, none of my stuff is wild caught. I'm 99.9% confident in that, but a lot of it is, you know, that is what happens when I've got, you know, these sort of colubrids. There's no reason to have a wild caught force water cobra in the UK.
Of course,
that's just not a thing. Even the boiga, actually, the boiga cynodon is she's wild caught, and I brought her from a reptile shop just because I saw that she was dying, and it was like an import that came in, and that animal was going to die. But the cyanea aren't. I know the cyanea aren't. But yeah, the I've gone off on a tangent here as well. But yeah,
it's cool. This is what I like.
But yeah, it's the only way you're gonna convince people. You know, if you people aren't gonna. You see the people on the TV shows. No one's coming round to my house or your house going, "Do you want to be on a TV show about nutcase reptile keepers?"
Yeah,
we're not the ones they pick, because they'd come in here and they'd come into your place. You'd be able to speak confidently and knowledgeably about the animals that you keep. And you'd be able to, you know, show that what you're keeping them in is acceptable, and, you know, what you're doing with them outside in terms of your target training and all the things that, you know, you do with your monitors that we see, isn't something that a lot of people are going to be able to go, you know, oh, he's a weirdo and he shouldn't be doing that, you
and
know.
It's not cruel.
And I'd hope that, you know, people would think the same as they come in here. You know, you seeing a snake in one of them sort of bigger ones like Mr. Pines and the Thai and the Royal Pythons and stuff, you know, I think a lot of people would struggle to look at that and go, you know, that's not fair. But we're not the ones that ever get showcased, you know. Not that I want to be on a TV show like that. I don't want to be, you know, classed as that weird. I already am, but that's the problem, isn't it? You know, these well, that yeah. Back to your question, that is the highest. That is the highest thing, and that's what my channel is all about, you know, and that's what I'm trying to do. If one person watches that and goes, "Oh man, maybe I should keep my corn snake in a 6-foot barn," like he's done his you know, his albino black rat snake. You know, he's told me that, you know, I could do that with a corn snake. Why should I do, like, you know, why? Let's do that. Oh, wait a minute, he's got another video here showing me how to build it. So
Yeah, exactly.
that's kind of like what that is what I'm going for. And you know, it's the same with you. We haven't got these sort of channels where we're like, you know, 130 animals. Look at this. We're doing a massive room and new animals unboxing, blah blah blah, and but we don't get the unfortunately we don't get the airtime. We're not as, you know, it's not as clickbaity and show offy and stuff. But there should be, like I spoke with Liam, you know, there's going to be that one person that watches our videos and goes, man, I'm gonna change the way I do things, and then, you know, that's what we're going for.
That's what it's all about, though. Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I've had a few people reach out to me and go, I had one guy which stands out, and he literally messaged me and he said, after the podcast I did, we're doing a lot of promo for Liam, but I don't really care. Like, go Reptiles and Research and subscribe. I mean, you've all probably subscribed to him anyway. Who am I? But anyway, he messaged to me, and someone who I was speaking to anyway, and he messaged me, and he was like, I'm going to change the whole trajectory because all I was focusing on was money and breeding and what I can get and what I can breed. And after listening to you and the way that you speak, in the sense of, because like you said earlier, that less is more, I wholeheartedly believe, and again, I'm going to be a hypocrite here and I'll address both sides. If I could go back in time, I think I would have only just had my mangrove monitor and then my tree monitors, and that would be it. So I would have 3 animals, and that four animals, sorry, and that would be it. So people are going to go, well, why don't you do it now then? Well, one, that means selling everything, which obviously is a possibility, but I am attached to them and I love them as much as you can love a lizard that tries to kill you. But I do have an affinity to these animals. They are my family. I see them as, like, I have a human child. My human child is slightly more prioritized, but they're right up there with him. But there's 2 sides in my mind, and you can give me your opinion on this. So one side of my mind is probably where you are, because you don't breed anything, do you? As in, like, snakes and stuff.
I haven't bred anything for a while. That I have bred the animal. I mean, we can talk about them later, but I have bred some of the snakes that I've got. I do have pairs of snakes. And lizards and stuff. But yeah, I'm not a breeder. And I'm actually, the animals that I have bred, the last ones of the clutches I've kept, because I look at them and go, no, I can't do this. Can't give you to someone who's gonna
put you in a box,
not give you what I'm going to give you. So they don't leave. Yeah,
that's fair enough. Because I was gonna say, one side of me is like, because the room I'm in, like I say, is quite a big room. I could put 2 huge enclosures in this room, and then have like a pair of tree monitors in one, and then have my mangrove monitor in a massive walk in. And I think I'd be content with that. I think I'd be over the moon with that. But then another side of me is like, I'm the only person in the UK right now, and potentially ever. I don't want to say ever because I'm only young, but I'm going to say ever, because why not blow my own trumpet? It's my podcast. But to get regular planned eggs from a mangrove monitor.
Right. Yeah.
So I've had 3 clutches from her this year, and 3 to 4 clutches a year is a very good year from people in America that are actually breeding them. No one in the UK has done it. And that is probably because many haven't tried, but still. So I'm like, she's a wild caught animal. So her sacrifice to live in a box, I should at least try to breed her, because anyone that's going to watch this podcast, if you're not a complete vegan and you don't have a pet, I'll be honest, I don't care, because you're being a hypocrite. All meat, all leather, all dogs, everything came from the wild. So what we do here with our reptiles is no different. If anything, it's a lot better the way that you and I keep our reptiles than the way people keep pigs and sheep and cows.
Definitely.
But that's a tangent for another day. It's just, again, I think people are very quick to throw criticism when they're actually in a glass house, and then they start throwing stones.
Oh, definitely.
And I like to try and be aware of it. But again, I'm digressing. So my mangrove monitor, if anyone's going to breed them in the UK, they're hard to breed because they try and kill each other. There's one thing getting eggs from a female, but there's another thing trying to breed them. But either way, I'm right now standing the best chance. So I almost feel like I have a duty to her and her sacrifice of coming from the wild to try and repopulate the hobby. But then I think if I ever did breed her and I ever did get a boyfriend for her or a parthenogenetic egg, I think I'd be the same as you, and I think I'd just keep it. So that means I can have a mangrove monitor forever until I die.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one side of me is like, because I don't class myself as a breeder at all. I breed Ackies, but I'm not a breeder. I'm just a keeper. And I say to people as well, like for me, my ethics is you have to keep an animal that if you never, ever, ever get an egg from it, you're happy. Like what you do with your stuff.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start depending on animals to breed and you have to make X amount of money a month to be able to cover your overheads, then you start to lose the love for it because you're putting too much pressure on your animals. Because obviously you and I can't sit here and hate breeders that are ethical, because obviously we have animals that came from breeders.
Well, exactly, yeah. And in my mind, the more animals that are coming, exotic animals are going to be sold to people regardless if we want that to happen or not. There's going to be the sale of however many thousands, millions of exotic animals every year. I'd rather that come from a captive bred ethical breeder than come from the wild. So that's my stance on that. So I'm definitely not against people like yourself who are putting Ackies in the market. A good responsible keeper who's promoting good husbandry, and a good size animal as well. I don't really care about the ethical iguana breeders in the UK if there's, or the ethical reticulated piper breeders or anything like that. But that's a different story. Not that there is any. I don't think there is any iguana breeders in the UK. Well, maybe not. But
there might be one. There might be a one or two soon.
Yeah, but
I said, well, on that quick. There's a guy on my podcast called Rango. Well, his name's slipping me now. Rango's Gaff on Instagram. He's a kid. Not that I'm a man, but he's a kid. And he's just got a trio of exanthic het albino, which can make snow iguanas. And I even said to him on the podcast, so if he watches this, like, hey, Rango, and I appreciate you and I like the stuff you do, but I like to address both sides of every coin, because there will be someone sitting at home to every podcast going, well, what about this? And that's why I like to play devil's advocate, even when I agree. But I said to him, I'm like, where are the iguanas going to go?
Yeah.
Like, it's all, like I say, for my mangrove monitor, I spoke to one of my friends about this who breeds tree monitors. Realistically, there isn't a massive market in the UK for mangrove monitors. There is, don't get me wrong, everyone would love one, but the people that can do it properly, even I question if I can do it properly sometimes, because they're a lot. But let's just say 5% of reptile keepers would want them and could do it properly. That's only like 5 babies a year I would need to produce. But then that's why I've stopped breeding Ackies, because the market's too saturated. So you need to be ethical in the sense that I'm not going to put animals out there that aren't going to sell or will go to bad homes because I have to sell to anyone because they have to go. Yeah. So on that iguana point, it's one thing breeding it, because like I say, if you're going to breed, only incubate 2 of the eggs, keep the babies forever, cool. But if you're going to mass produce a 6-foot demon lizard for money, or a 18-foot demon snake, not a demon, I'm not villainizing things, but in the wrong hands, they're dangerous animals. There's no point in lying.
Of course. Yeah, definitely.
Same as my mangrove monitor. She's only 2.5 foot, but if I lost concentration with her, I've lost a finger.
Oh, definitely. And I've had my wrist slit by an iguana. So in the animal sanctuary that I used to manage, it was an exotics one. We had 7 iguanas in there because we were constantly just getting iguanas surrendered to us.
Yeah.
And one caught me off guard one day. I was trying to remove a water bowl without it catching me. Silly, just try to slide it out the back. 7 foot. I think that's like 6 or 7 foot long vivariums. And I just thought, I could pull that out one side, and I couldn't. And he caught me, and he slipped my wrist. And I went to hospital and had it all sewn back up. And that was like nothing to them. Do you know what I mean? Nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, horrendously dangerous animals. And I've been, I've brushed crocodile teeth when I used to catch Morlett's crocodiles at the zoo I work for, and nowhere near as much blood as as what this
Yeah,
iguana that you could buy for like 50 quid as a pet in a pet shop.
it's
You know,
scary. It's scary.
it's horrendously scary.
Yeah, shops don't. It's just turned into like a bashing podcast, but I don't really care. I quite like it because the problem is with it, like, I think I'll be honest with it now. I think you've been completely sound. There's going to be nothing said that you've said yet that's going to give you hate. But I feel like there's a couple of things that I've said that people are going to go, well, hang on, because the problem is with opinions, there's always two sides of them. That's the
Yeah, of
problem.
course. Yeah.
And I think people like you and I will have our close circle where we'll, like, me and one of my friends, I won't mention him, but he'll know who he is if he watches this. We'll see a monitor in a small enclosure or a bad enclosure or a fat monitor, and we'll send each other pictures and go, oh my God, look how disgusting this is. And
Yeah, of course.
but
Yeah.
we don't promote the hate publicly.
Mm.
So I think it's a conversation that everybody is having to a certain degree, depending where you fit on the reptile ethical ladder, if we're calling it. But no one has it publicly. And I think it needs to change because YouTube does make, especially in America, they make you think a 6-foot green iguana or a 16-foot retic is a great pet for beginners. And then, like you say, you get a 15, 16-year-old kid go into a shop and the shop doesn't even care. Some shops do, but other shops just want to make money. And they'll, like, when I brought my peach throat, I won't bother naming the shop, but anyone who's into monitors know where they came from in the UK. It's a baby, but if it's a male, it can be 4 or 5 foot long and could definitely like take a finger or cause serious tendon damage if as an adult. Anyway, the shop didn't ask me for proof of setup, didn't ask me my experience, didn't ask me if I'm familiar with freshly imported animals, didn't ask me like if I know basic husbandry for it, didn't ask me anything,
Right.
just literally wanted the money.
Yeah.
And again, thankfully, I'm relatively okay. It was my first ever imported animal, and to be honest, I nearly lost it, but thankfully I didn't. And someone who was a little bit less experienced than me, and I only just saved him because I caught it just at the right time because he was going downhill. But with reptiles, you can't see it until it's too late. So the reality is, it probably would have died in someone else's hands. And the shop would have just got the 465 quid or whatever I paid for him. And just rubbed their hands with it. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
It is,
and that's the problem. There's good and there's bad, of course. There's good shops, bad shops, good keepers, bad keepers. So same as everything, isn't it? At the end of the day, and there is, 1 or 2 people, I'm sure, that would devote their life to an iguana.
Yeah.
You've got a conservatory. You could convert that into a lovely iguana enclosure, but there isn't the amount of iguanas worth of people that are in the shops, that are people that are willing to do that. I could put an iguana enclosure at the half end of this. I thought about doing it with a Bosque monitor. I thought that, there's definitely a Bosque monitor out there somewhere that needs, well, I know there is because we used to take them in all the time at the other sanctuary, but there was definitely a Bosque monitor in there that I could have taken home with me and given half this shed to. But unfortunately, there just isn't enough keepers out there that are willing to do that for these kind of animals. But yeah, there is a couple of good people. So it's hard not to slate these people. But there is good and there's bad, and there's very few people, I think, especially in the UK, that can look after some of these animals. I mean, I don't know. I'm not too current. I don't really go into reptile shops anymore. I purchase most of my stuff online, and I get my frozen stuff from reptile shops now because it saves me a tenner for delivery. But I don't really know. But back when I was really into keeping reptiles, and I'm obviously really into keeping reptiles, but back when I was maybe shopping around a bit and going into shops and seeing stuff, I was seeing like Nile monitors, water monitors, and iguanas and sulcatas and Aldabra tortoises and stuff for sale. And I'm hoping that it's changed. But yeah, it's
not really. Not really. I don't see as many retics anymore.
No, we definitely got on the retic thing, but I'm hoping we got on the Nile monitor and stuff
No,
thing, because I've dealt
no,
with, man, that's horrendous.
no.
Because I've dealt with some gnarly Nile monitors and not water monitors, but I've worked with a full grown water monitor, and they shouldn't, unless you've got a room or like a conservatory or an outbuilding.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a different story, isn't it? We
Well, this is the problem, though, isn't it? Like I say, because I don't script these podcasts, and I didn't really know where it was going to go. And me and Liam sort of had a similar conversation, because I'm not really scared on saying my opinion, and I just want to say it's my opinion. Like, there's three things. There's my opinion, someone else's opinion, and then the truth. And I fall somewhere towards the truth, and then you, who, if you don't believe what I'm saying, you fall somewhere to the truth. That's all there is, And I'm not a judgmental person at all. Like I say, I'm highly spiritual, and I wholeheartedly believe that if you were, for example, let's just say I walked and lived in your shoes, I would have done exactly the same things that you've done, and vice versa. Or someone who keeps 1,000 snakes in racks. If I was born, raised, influenced the exact same way as them, I would be acting the exact same way. And I'm fully aware of that. And I'm blessed and lucky that, one, I have that mindset, and two, I have the mindset to go, do you know what? These animals are sentient. These animals suffer with mental illnesses. These animals suffer with boredom. These animals suffer with stress. These animals suffer with fatigue and obesity and all these personified problems, but they do suffer with it in their own right. So who am I to not try and push just to give your lizard some leaf litter? That's all you got to do. You know what I mean? That's all you got to do.
Yeah, but it takes very little to give them stimulation, doesn't it? Really, in the grand scheme of things. I've chucked a load of leaf litter in today. Actually, it's prime leaf litter season. So beautiful. Yeah,
and it's free. Like, as long as you can get it
yeah.
from somewhere that's not near a road, you can get it from somewhere that's ideally got no like pesticides. And if you're worried about it, I don't do it myself. If you're worried about it, just put it in the freezer or boil it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, see, I'm not. Yeah, I'm the same. I get it from some. I have a couple of rules. It's the same as you. I almost have a copy and paste answer when people ask me. Same as getting wood, branches and things like that. As long as it's not near water, not near the road, and isn't covered in dog crap or something like that, then it's fine. Chuck it in, and I've seen branches hanging out of ovens on other YouTube channels in the UK, and gone, oh man, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah,
but yeah, no, that's and like you say, it's cheap and it's free. Well, it's free.
It's free. Yeah, and who doesn't love getting out into nature? And like I said, we'll go back to positives, but if you've got a corn snake or a royal or an aki or a frilled dragon or anything, doesn't matter what, a leopard gecko, doesn't matter what, if you've got an exotic pet, which I imagine you do or you're looking to, otherwise you wouldn't be watching the podcast, research where they're from. You can go on like loads of different websites. We'll go on to this because we touched on this earlier. I use iNaturalist, or you can just do a quick, as basic as it is, Wikipedia, find out just the country they're from, and then search rainforests of Indonesia, and then you can look, and it doesn't tell you exactly the locality of microhabitat of where your animal is inhabiting, but it does tell you a basic surroundings. So you can go on these iNaturalist websites, and then you can go, right, okay, my leopard gecko, because now they're like they're found to be subtropical. I don't know loads about them.
I can't wait to do. I've got a really good one actually to do.
So there you go. So then you look at that and you go, oh, so a heat mat and Exoterra desert sand isn't what they're living on.
No.
But then there's this sort of like a rocky outcrop with a little bit of like shrub grass with some, I don't know, overhanging trees on this picture with someone's taken of a leopard gecko. Like, and then you go out for a walk and you see a branch that looks similar to the branch that you saw in the picture, and then you go, oh, and you get all excited, and then you're all right, I'll get that branch, and then you go to, I don't know, B&Q, and you find a little shrubby plant that's reptile safe, that looks similar to got to put the caveat in there, but you just quick Google the species, is it safe for reptiles? There's so many people asking, you find it, and then you see it, and then you position and design your enclosure, then you put your leopard gecko in there. And then after 2 or 3 days of exploring and settling in and learning its surroundings, it climbs up on them rocks that you've pictured it. And its body's half in the shade because of the branch. And then it's cryptic basking. And that, for me, that's what reptile keeping is about, you know? And you see this animal behaving how it would in the wild. And then you don't feel the need to buy anything new. Like I imagine when you see your snakes climb up and hang, like you say, your royals, and they're hanging over a branch like you'd see a green tree python. And you think to yourself, like, this is why I'm keeping these animals.
Yeah, 100%. And I've got no intention. And it might come down to I look at it in a few different ways, but that definitely combats any want to get another animal, because I walk in here and I'm in love with, you know, the animals that I've got. And the animals that aren't living in these vivariums that I've currently built, I know that I've got to build them. So in my brain, I'm stubborn like that. I'm just like, dude, gonna do that. Not gonna think about the future in terms of, you know, another animal. But I also don't want another animal because I know I physically can't fit any in here.
Yeah.
With the enclosures that I want to build. So but yeah, I also look at them as like, you know, I'm 34 years old. If I get another snake, I'm going to be like, you know, in my 60s. When that thing's an adult. So there is that as well for me. I do sort of look at that every now and again and go like, you know, like once the animals that I've currently got start to, you know, die of old age or whatever, that just leads me to having maybe a bit more space to do something else for an animal that I've already got that maybe needs a bigger enclosure. So that's currently my mentality, which is very different to most keepers, and I'm completely aware of that.
It's good though,
and that's that. Yeah, well, I hope that's good, and that's probably why you know I haven't got like 1 million followers on Instagram and stuff. But yeah, so yeah, that's the way I see it anyway. But yeah, I've gone off on a ramble there.
No, it's fine. On that though, like I was going to say, because so I had all the animals that I've got here before we moved. Some of them were in smaller enclosures, and I'm in the process of upgrading them. But I lived in, like, it wasn't a studio, but it was pretty much a studio apartment. And I'm people aren't going to believe me, but it's genuinely the truth. Like, you walked in through the front door, to the left was like a 6-foot Viv stack, to the right was like a 5-foot Viv stack, and then directly crammed in the corner was a little kitchen. And you walk into like the lounge, which is also our bedroom, and there was literally a wardrobe, a bed, and then nothing but floor to ceiling Vivs. And it was shanty. It was like it was honestly, but like you get to the point where you're, and again, I'm in a different mindset now, because you get to the point where you think to yourself, like, what are you doing with your life? And then I moved here, and I literally, when I moved here, I had everything that I already have. I had in my head the biggest enclosure I could give for it, and that's what I wanted to do. And then I've got everything in my head panned out, and everything at the moment, other than this tree monitor that I've got, which is enclosure broke, and my Timor monitors, which I'm in the process of selling anyway. So part of me is like, do I want to spend 700 quid on an enclosure that I'm just going to not use? Because I like designing enclosures for said species, so they're not multi-useful. But other than those two, nothing in this room needs an upgrade, but I want to upgrade everything. But the point I was going to make is the luxury, because people see it as a negative, but the luxury of having no space keeps you very in line with your true philosophy of your 6 species, 10 species, whatever you've got. Like I said on Liam's podcast, I'm only going to focus on 4 species and monitor. That's it. And I'm going to have a couple of pairs or a pair of the said species, and that's it, in big enclosures. That's my plan. And I've got, just looking now, I think that's a 14-foot, 4, 8, 12. Yeah, that's a 14-foot wall there. My plan is to have a 7 by 4 by 6, so 7 long, 4 deep, 6 tall, and that'll be like my mangrove enclosure. And it won't be anytime soon, but it will definitely be sooner rather than later. So like once my plans come into fruition. But then, because I've got in my head, like, there's this rough footprint of the enclosure that I'm going to build, like you say, if something else comes up, that takes away from those plans. And sometimes you need to, like, digress and change in my instance, because, for example, mangrove monitors are so rare in the UK. There's like 5 in the whole country. If a boy becomes available, I have to change my plans in order to fit that male. Otherwise, like I said earlier, in the sense of breeding, it will never happen. But then I'm like, because I conflict myself all the time, and I go, well, what's wrong with just having one girl and keeping it as a pet and sticking to your... Because if I had 2 species in here and all of this was spare space, I think I would even with my mindset, I think I would slowly digress and go, oh, I do really like Strophoros geckos and I do really like tokay geckos. So it's a fine line that I tease it, regardless of anybody else. Like I say, if a male mangrove monitor came up tomorrow, I would 100% buy it, knowing that my tree monitor needs an upgrade. Like, I'm not going to sit here and lie, but it's one of those things that comes up in a blue moon, and you have to sort of take it as it comes. But then I'm being a hypocrite by going, don't buy more animals. So, like, what's your opinion on that, of what I've just said, in the sense of me? Like, I don't care, it won't hurt my feelings, because I already know that I'm a bad keeper. So...
ultimately, it boils down to your own opinion. Like, you've got to make that decision. Do you want to keep that animal the way you've just described? Could you do a little bit better? Could you do this? Could you spend that money? Or do you want to breed it? And you the only person that can tell you what to do is yourself. You need to, if you does breed, like, to me, I've bred the Northern Pines, false water cobras, and the Boiga Cyanea.
Have you still got those Boiga Cyanea babies?
I have a Boiga Cyanea baby. I have one. Yeah, and this is where it comes to. This is what I'm trying to say.
This is me losing space. I'm like, message. I'll buy it.
There you go. See, but I wanted to do that. For me, it was kind of like, instead of producing babies to then sell, because like we said, like, there's no money in false water cobras, or I don't know if there is now, but there wasn't back in the day, especially once you've fed them and you've bought tubs and you've done all that.
Yeah.
And the Boiga Cyanea, I don't know if there was money in that at all, but
I think there might be. There's not many.
There might be money. There might be money in that, but what I'm trying to say is, for me, for those animals, it was kind of full circle keeping. I had I had animals that I assumed were thriving because they were living in 5x2. I thought I was doing quite good. Me now would look at that and go, well, you weren't as good, were you? Because you've done better. But at the time, that was the best I could provide for the space that I had. So the next thing for me to do then was be like, right, okay, can I produce some eggs? And obviously with the false water cobras, that wasn't particularly challenging, and the Northern Pines wasn't challenging. Just not many people were doing it in the UK. But the Boiga Cyanea was a challenge. It wasn't. I sort of looked into a lot of the diets, and the reasons why a lot of them were becoming like trapped in the eggs and stuff, because of the diets and the high calcium levels in the eggshells and stuff like that. But that was it. It was kind of like a one and done. I've done that. I know I can do that, and now that's it. I don't need to give more animals out into the market. But then personally, I'm quite happy. Although I put my life on YouTube, it's in a way where I'm trying to show people, slightly better ways of doing husbandry and DIY skills and a bit like that. So I'm not kind of
you don't need the validation of being classed as a breeder.
Yeah, and I'm not worried about putting more false water cobras into my local shop or anything like that. But that's just me. You could be completely different, but you could still keep animals really well. That's the beauty of this hobby. Essentially, you could keep that one single female perfect, and I do that. Do I do that? What do I do that with? I mean, I do that with all my snakes now. I don't keep in pairs.
Yeah.
So there's apart from the Royals, there's zero chance in anything breeding. So I've gone out of my way. I've spent 500 odd pound extra to make sure my false water cobra male isn't with my false water cobra female, rather than put them together and be like, oh look, I've had some more eggs. That's clever. So it just comes down to personal preference, really, but that's just me. I don't mind being sort of locked in my little shed, just keeping the animals the way I do, and not worried about I know that I've bred them. I know that I can do that. So to me, I've kind of done full circle. But yeah, so ultimately, I'm not going to judge you, mate.
No, you
gonna...
make a good point, because I'll be honest, like I said on Liam's podcast, monitor lizards, basically there's nothing to do with a male stimulus. People think males trigger females to start fertilogenesis, which is an egg cycle. The males have nothing to do with it. So a female will lay eggs regardless of a male's presence. So some people go, oh well, I've never had a male when lay eggs. Like, so let me think, what species do I have? No, I've got eggs from all of them. There I am blowing my own trumpet again. I'm trying to think if I've got my female Tristis. I haven't had eggs from, but I don't think she's old enough yet. But I've had eggs from both my Timors. I've had eggs from my mangrove. All my tree monitors are boys or a baby. I've had eggs from my Ackies. So like, getting eggs regardless of fertile eggs, but getting eggs, like you say, it's full circle keeping in the sense of, well, it's not quite yet, but getting eggs, you know that your animal is healthy, and it's especially with monitors, because they don't lay eggs. They do in some circumstances. I've seen some blue tree monitors that were kept like absolute death, and they somehow bred, and it's just that individuals need like internal desires to breed. But anyway, by the by, so by getting eggs from my mangrove monitor, I know that I'm keeping her properly. And then by not just a one-off, by getting 3 clutches, because I cycle them in the sense of wet and dry seasons. I cycle them in light cycles. I cycle them with temperature, humidity, and dietary like requirements that, like you say, match nature, to be able to try and get these eggs. But I think for selfish reasons, no other reason, I want a male so I can produce a baby, hopefully, so then I can keep it. And then again, you make a valid point. So I'm 28, monitors will go 20 odd years. So I don't know how old she is, but let's just say I have a baby in, let's say 4 years. So I'll be 32. It lives for 20. I'll be 52. So that's fine. But then if I get another one, I'll be 72 dealing with a mangrove monitor.
Yeah.
And you make a good point, because being sub 30, because I feel like my life's going to change when I hit 30. I'm only 2 years away, but I'm dreading it. I dreaded 25, and then I realized it was nothing. But yes, and then but I think I'll get to like 30, and then I'll go, because you make a valid point, because my brain is going, because all the stuff I've got in here, the oldest animal I've got in here is probably 7, and the youngest I've got is 3 months. So I've got them for like another 20 odd years, all being well, like touch wood, like 20 odd years. But then I don't want to get out of reptile keeping at 50. But then will I be able to keep the way that I keep and who I keep and how I keep at 50? Obviously, I won't know that until. But then if I buy more animals at 40, I'm not doing almost my due diligence in the sense of the animals. And this, again, I'm going on a tangent, but I've got a boss monitor myself, and it was a rescue. And I'll be completely honest, when I took it, I knew I used to have a boss back before divorce, and it was in this was like 10 years ago. It was it was literally from building site, reclaimed materials. And I mean, it was so badly built, like nothing like your stuff. There was like gaps like this in the corner. The boss couldn't get out because it was like 4 foot long, but its whole hand
ventilation
could get
holes.
out. Exactly. It was perfect. And I had like a double glazed window that flapped up, and I had like ply that didn't quite fit properly, but it was like 10 by 4.5 by 4.5 or something like that. And even then, my boss was 4 foot, and even then I looked at that, and this was, let's say 8 years ago. And I was like, that's just disgusting. Like, he's too big for that enclosure, but I couldn't give bigger. Anyway, so this rescue boss came up, and it was pretty much on death's door, and I couldn't not take it, and I shouldn't have taken it because I was in my tiny little studio flat, and I knew I couldn't house it. And I've got it now, and I can house it now. It needs an upgrade in about 6 months' time. It's about 1.5 foot long, and it's in a 6x3 at the moment, so it's pushing the limits. For me, a monitor lizard should be in something 3 foot longer, minimum 3 foot longer than what it is, and then at least as long as it is deep. So if you've got a 5 foot lizard, you need it in a 15 by 5 or the equivalent square footage, in my opinion.
That's a good ratio. Yeah.
So like an Ackie being a 2-ish foot lizard needs to be in a 6x2, in my opinion, based on that. there are different criterias. For example, tree monitors are 3-ish, 4 foot long, but they want height rather than floor space, so they don't need to be in it.
Yeah.
So, but that's basically in my head. So for a 4-foot basque, I want to be 10 to 12 foot. But look, I'm already cutting corners. But 12 foot by 4 foot. And I could house that here, but then that takes away a lot of my space for an animal that I didn't even want. I only took, which is the truth. I love them and I adore them, but I know how much they need. So I didn't want it in the sense that I knew that it's going to take up so much of my money, time, and space when I was trying to prioritize other species. And I love my little guy. I love Bumpy. Like, he's a beast. He comes out and runs around for bugs, and I adore him. And I don't know if I can rehome him. So I'm going to have to either rethink the whole entire reptile room, because I could put him in 8x4. I think he's going to be stunted because he was a bag of bones, and I think it's a girl as well. So I don't think it'd be that big, but he was literally like on death's door. Like, you took him out and he just flopped over your hand and couldn't even pick his head up or anything. And I thought he was going to die, if I'm honest. And I thought at least he's going to die in a half sensible home. But like you say, reptile, which is an amazing point. Reptiles just keep living.
They do live.
And I mean, his lights are off now, but he's still going with me. And I think a lot of people, this is again a completely different topic, but we'll go into it, myself included. And as I've just said, I've done it with my boss. A lot of people think they're doing these animals favors by rescuing animals. And the reality is you're taking them into just as a bad situation if you need to rehome them. And you are and you aren't, because as the reptile hobby, it's a general, trying to think how I want to word this, but it's a general common practice to rehome animals, which I don't agree with. I think you should have an animal like yourself. You've got it, you have it for life. That's what I want to be, and that's where I want to go. And that's why I want to sell a couple that I have a monetary figure to, because of the rest that I don't. I know that unless I die or they die, they're with me. That's how I want to be. Why do you think people, because you say you've got a couple of rescues yourself, you're a different circumstance because obviously you've taken them on, you've kept them. But why do you think people, even knowing, because I knew that I couldn't house my boss and I did it, and I've got my opinions on it, but I won't say my yet to cloud your judgment. Why do you think people do that and like take on? Because we all do it and we've all done it. So why do you think we do it?
I honestly don't know, mate. It's a weird one, isn't it? And I don't see. I think. What am I trying to say? So I think. Yeah, I'm definitely the wrong person to ask that question to, with the
because you keep all yours,
with what I'm going for. But yeah, people just seem to think that these guys can just live in tiny spaces, and I'm assuming it boils down to the whole, like, seeing an animal bask, assuming it doesn't do much because it spends all its days sitting under the sun doing nothing. Maybe it boils down to that. Maybe it boils down to that they're not the same as a mammal running around in a field going nuts. It must be a little bit of that, and then obviously it dates back to people. We've done this for tens and tens of years, keeping animals in boxes, and they've lived. They've lived for a while, and we've assumed that they've been okay and they're happy because they haven't told us otherwise. And then they died, and then we'll do it again, and then we'll tell people you can do that. So yeah, it's a tough one, because I do look at that. I look at animals now and go, that can't be in an enclosure that small. But I'm hopefully trying to make a name for myself doing things a little bit differently, and just sort of going in all guns blazing, going, no, I do it like this. This is 6 foot vivarium for any colubrid that most people would keep in a 4 foot vivarium, and I'm sort of just doing that. So I don't care what people think. But
have you got a rule of thumb, like I say for me, for I think a monitor, for the most part, generally speaking, should be a 3 foot lizard should be in a 9 by 3 foot enclosure. Have you got a general rule of thumb for snakes that you try and go for?
For snakes, I like the idea that they can stretch fully out. But that being said, I still can't provide, an 8 foot pushing 9 foot vivarium for my my pine snake and my Taiwanese beauty
Yeah.
snake are long snakes, you know, and they can stretch out, not along the front piece of glass because that's only 6 foot long, but they can stretch out in terms of, you know, all the way along from sort of one corner up to the next corner, because it is longer than 6 foot if you measure that sort of distance. But
Yeah, the volume.
yeah, but I like that idea, and I think that is something that people still aren't doing, especially with a corn snake that can get to 6 foot long. People aren't doing that. It's the norm to be the best keeper in the world would put a corn snake in a 4x2 when it's a 5 or 6 foot animal. But then I'm also doing it, like I said, I'm doing it with my Taiwanese beauty snake. I'm still not doing that. But I don't really have a rule of thumb, because I knew that I am going to build 6 foot vivariums, and I knew that all of my large colubrids that I've got are between the sort of 6 to 7 foot sort of range. So I knew that I could get 6 of my 6 foot stacks along that side of the reptile room. And they're not a specific size for a specific animal. They are just six vivariums for the 6 snakes that happen to be about 6 or 7 foot long.
Yeah.
So I don't tend to have a ratio like that, but I don't know. Some I've got, obviously in my head I'm looking at things going, no, that's too small. And even with videos that I see of Phelsuma and tokay geckos and crested geckos. I did a video, I really laid into crested gecko care sheets because of the size vivariums that we give them. And it's hard to have like a rule of thumb, particularly for a crested gecko, because I've got 2 crested geckos in a 3x3 foot Viv Exotic vivarium. So if I was going down the ratio for that, I'd be like, well, it needs to be 10 times longer than the animal. But I still look at that and go, that is absolute minimum for me, because I'm watching these crested geckos jump around from like one side of the Viv to another side of the Viv, like with ease, 3 foot, and that's that. I think I did a video. I think I put it in the video. Like that's like I could put 3 exoterras in there, that exoterra terrariums in there that is suggested for the crested geckos. I don't have a ratio essentially, but I do have I do sort of look at things and get annoyed most of the time.
Well, it's a little bit hard to make out, but your top right shoulder, is that your pine snake?
No, that's that one there.
Yeah, so that's
my Taiwanese beauty snake.
Okay. I can see something snaking around in the back.
Yeah, she's out. She's out in there.
So I was going to say, because obviously I can see there your enclosure's got 1, 2, 3 different, just from what I can see, 3 different volumes of branches and heights, and then 2 ledges. Or
there's a main sort of ledge on the cool side. There's a massive root ball in the middle that she actually lays across most of the time, and then I've made like a different height thing in there with more sticks. There's about 10 branches in there in total. And then there is actually like what she's laying on now, which is like right at the very end. Can't even do it there. That is like a planter that I made to just make a video about making like rock work without doing like a 6 foot background. I just did like a rock work planter, and she actually lays on that. That's why nothing ever grows, because I've just got all this snake just laying on it all the time. But she uses all of that. I was
going to say, because that it's all well and good having a massive enclosure, but if you don't, for example, let's say you've got a tree monitor in the minimum requirement for a pair of green tree monitors is 6 foot tall, 4 foot wide, and 2 foot deep. I think that's a bit too small, but that's the minimum requirement for a pair. So let's just say you've got a pair of tree monitors in that enclosure, but you've only got 2 branches in there, and the walls aren't climbable. All of a sudden, that enclosure is tiny. But then if you have a tree monitor in I don't agree with it, but a 4x2, so 4 tall, 4 wide, and 2 deep, but it's completely packed out, climbable walls, shelves, loads of branches, the usable space in the smaller enclosure is better than so even if you guys are listening and you haven't either got the space, you've already got your corn snake, don't go and sell it just because you can't fit a 6 foot Viv in there, but look at your enclosure and go, right, even something silly like buying a hide and screwing it to the roof of the enclosure.
Yep.
So your snake can go up. That's a completely different platform. It's different elevation. A branch going across, a ledge going across, because then it all of a sudden doubles the usable space, which is obviously like what you've incorporated in your enclosures, rather than just a big enclosure with one branch going all the way across.
Yeah.
Then the snake can do and fully, and then also as well, I think people sleep on this, but I see that you've got loads of different size branches, and especially for monitors and chameleons, if you give a chameleon all one size branch, it doesn't develop grip strength in its hands, because obviously it needs to be able to, same as if you go to the gym and only dumbbell curl, you're only going to be good at that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for a snake, and also I think we also don't do stuff that is going to be dangerous, but for me, I do some splayed twiggy branches. So one, they move, so the monitor's actually got to like, whoa, and like use its muscle mass to be able to balance itself out. And two, the branches are so thin, so they have to like think and go, oh, Jesus. So like, I think people sleep on that sort of level of enrichment that you've utilized in all of your enclosures there.
Yeah, definitely. And that is a thing. Like I could spend all day building these, like, you know, the 6 by 2.5 by 3 foot bibs, but if I didn't pack them out, then there's no point in building anything that big.
Yeah.
And you know, I feel like I've covered it on as many different levels as I can. The pine snake vivarium is completely different to the Taiwanese beauty snake vivarium, which is then completely different to the barn vivarium, but they all boil down to like usable space. Now, the pine snake, I know he doesn't climb. He's it's not that kind of snake, you know. I've seen him climb, so he doesn't have all these branches going around like that. But because of that, I've given him a lot more burrowing space and big branches or big logs for him to get inside. And you know, it's still a lot of surface areas, but it's just displayed differently. Like a lot more natural. You wouldn't see a pine snake sort of 10 foot up in a pine tree. You know, you'd see them working their way around a fallen branch that's on the floor. So whereas the Taiwanese beauty snake, she's perfectly adapt to being in the trees. Now, you know, I don't have loads of footage or anything like that of them in the trees in the wild, but she can climb with ease. You know, she's a slender, muscly snake that's absolutely fine for that. And then you know, the barn vivarium, there's so many crates and stuff in there. Like if you want to put a picture of the barn vivarium up,
yeah,
like,
we'll do. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's so many like crates and different sort of levels in there, even to the point where I've got some old I've got it down here. I've got some old scaffold boards and stuff. And as long as they're not covered in anything particularly dangerous, you know, whatever was on them in the past as set and stuff, like, you know, I use them in there as shelves, and it's as basic as that. But because it's in the barn vivarium, it works perfectly fine.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, if you can do that with pieces of melamine or whatever, you know, and it just absolutely just multiplies the surface space in the vivarium. And I definitely do touch on that when I'm building stuff and when I'm kitting stuff out. I'm pretty sure I mention it.
No, you definitely do.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Obviously, I watch your content, as you probably saw from that story one time when I didn't realize you were on my laptop, like filming.
Oh yeah,
and,
yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I should know it's Reptile Shed. I obviously I don't keep snakes. And I still really like your stuff in the sense of I like your philosophies on how big you keep stuff because it's inspiring. And that's why I watch your content in the sense of, I'll be honest, I don't watch it to see your snakes because that's not my niche, but I watch it to see your passion as well as like I'm not a chippy, but I'm quite handy and I reckon I could build an enclosure. I've watched all of your how to build enclosures and I'm not even a novice, you know what I mean? Because doesn't matter how good you are at something, someone like, let's just say I'm speaking to the smartest person in the world on Aki monitors. I guarantee you there's a behavior I've observed that they've never heard of, you know, because no one's, and that's what I like about reptile keeping. It's infinite in the sense of we're never, ever going to have it. We're going to continually grow and always learn. And that's what I love about it. And I've always said that the day I know everything, or at least think I do, I'll just knock it on the head, you know, because it's clearly not for me anymore. So
yeah.
you do cover, I like I say, that's why I like your channel. And the problem is with smaller channels is I don't know when I discovered you. It wasn't ages ago. But the good thing about it is though, because I'll be honest, I'm not the sort of guy that blows smoke up people's asses. But I probably only found your channel like 3 or 4 months ago. Then watch a couple of videos because obviously YouTube recommends it. You watch a couple of videos, and then all of a sudden you're in a wormhole, and then you watch most of your stuff. But the problem is you've probably got gems from like, I don't know how long you've been on social, but for like a year ago.
A year, yeah.
So you've probably got gems there where someone like myself, who only discovered you recently, hasn't gone back all through those archives. And the problem is with social media, you've probably addressed on, let's just say, for example, how to care for a royal python, let's just say, as like your 3rd video that you've ever made. But because you're 200 videos in, people are like, oh, where's the royal python stuff? Where's the royal python stuff? I know your channel's royal python centric, but just as an example. So I'd just say to people as well, like when you're discovered a new reptile channel, always make sure you just go through the archives, because the chances are that you haven't seen half the stuff. And like I say, me for you, I've been through your channel over the last few months after discovering you and just watching, and I don't know what it was titled called, but the one where you were making a garden for your tortoise outside or something like that.
I've done a few of the tortoise run ones. Yeah.
I think that was the first video of yours that I saw. I think.
Oh, really?
Because I was looking to do stuff like outside tortoise enclosure for my tortoise, who's sadly no longer with us. But and then I stumbled across your stuff, watched your stuff, liked your content, and then all of a sudden you go through the wormhole and you go through everything. And I didn't even find you for the sense of building enclosures, but now I go to you for like building enclosures. Because like I say, I'll be honest, every one of your enclosures, I've probably got 2 enclosures that would fit into your shed in the sense of aesthetics. The rest you're probably going, no, it's not for me. And none of mine are particularly bad. But I've only got 2 or 3. I'd say 3. My peach throat, my baby tree monitor, and one of my tristis enclosures would fit into your shed. But just on your shed quickly, because I don't know how long we've been going for. We've been going for about an hour and a half ish. So on a lot of people, because this is going to be different for you, because obviously you had all these animals already, and then you've moved them all into the reptile shed. And a lot of your stuff is, well, I'll ask the question and I'll let you go into it. So a lot of people go, I'll speak for me. I'll get an Aki. I'll get another Aki. I'll get another Aki. Okay, now I'm going to get some tree monitors. Okay, now I'm going to get a mangrove. Okay, now I'm going to get some tristis. But Akis are really, really hot from Australia, and so are tristis. But then tree monitors and mangroves, they're quite cool because they're from rainforests. All of a sudden, my reptile room gets really hot, and now my mangrove monitor enclosure is way too hot. So how did you design how much fluctuation in the sense of your species? I don't know how to word it. I know what I want to say, but I don't know how to word it.
I know what you want to say.
Yeah. So basically, how did you design your room around the species that you have, and how important is it to narrow in? For example, you say you've got like Falsuma and Cresties. Obviously, they're not hot species. If your room gets over 27 degrees, those animals are going to hate you.
Yep.
So yeah, how important is it to pick a group of reptiles when you're keeping reptiles to fit your room, and how did you go around designing your room?
It's extremely important. If I could do it all again, it wouldn't be as vast a collection as what I've got. I'm quite lucky in the sense that I don't keep, the hottest animal I keep is a bearded dragon, and he came across us as a bit of an accident. He's sort of 15 years old, and we took him in as a rescue, and to give him his last year or so of life, a bit of a retirement home. But I've been quite lucky in that I picked tropical and kind of like tropical animals. I know the royals are probably equally as hot, but they're kind of like locked away in that big enclosure that doesn't really affect too much. But it's very important. And if I could start all over again, everything would be smaller and cooler, 100%. European species, because that's just a no-brainer in the country that we live in right now. Trying trying to keep basking spots at 30 degrees is just
That's cold.
I
That's
know,
cold.
man, and
That's the cool end of most of my enclosures.
it's just crazy. I'm assuming because you're a Sparks, you've made that possible. But
I've illegally rigged my meter. No, I wish I had. Sadly, I haven't.
no, okay. I'll think about it every now and again. But yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, that's it's extremely important. And I didn't go into the shed build, I would say. I went into building a garden room. And this was just a garden room, the same way you'd build a garden room for, you know, a summer house in your back garden.
Yeah.
I didn't plan for it. If I could do it all again, I'd probably have I'd keep the insulation levels that I did, because, you know, I heat this entire room at night now. Although most of my, as I'm upgrading stuff, most of my thermostats are day and nights. But you know, I generally sort of turn everything off at night and just run this whole place now when it's sort of like freezing outside. I run it off of a 400-watt radiator. Because I've got 100 mil insulation in the walls and the ceiling. It stays warm, but then that's kind of the enemy in the summer, because then
Doesn't cool down.
you know, yeah, I've got vivariums that are getting hot, and even if the heat isn't on, the lighting is still, you know, everything's got LED and T5 UVB. They get hot, so that all builds up, and that gets to the point where, you know, it is hot. And this year was a challenge. This year was the hottest, obviously, it's been for a while.
Yeah.
When we were getting sort of 35 degrees outside. So I just turned the reptile shed off. It's the only way I could do it, was just turn the whole place off. And I don't actually keep the cresties out here, but they're not actually my biggest problem. My biggest problem would be my crocodile skink. So I've got the Nova Guinea, the muddy eye crocodile skink, but he is in such a, I built a paludarium for him quite recently, so he is in quite a really wet environment that has got a big water section, flowing water, so that does stay cool. And I didn't have any trouble with that during the summer. And the actual lizard itself, as far as I could tell, was absolutely fine. But I've addressed it now, and it, like, you know, what I would tell people now is ventilation. And I built this entire place with zero ventilation.
Yeah.
So it's obviously got the main door, 2 windows, and the actual Daisy's got her own door as well. So there is cross ventilation. But last week I put in a like a loft extractor fan, you know, like the kind of
the inline fans,
inline ones. Yeah. There's a brand in the UK called Monsoon, and they make a pretty decent one. It's not expensive. I've got one I fitted one in my bathroom, and you know, it sucks. It sucks good. And so I fitted it in here, and it actually lifted. I came in a couple of days after leaving it running. And I was walking, wasn't even looking. I was looking into the Royal Viv, so I was walking down the hallway of the room, and like I felt the floor be a bit weird. And I was like, "What's going on here?" And because I had the window shut, it had sucked the lino up. Like the lino had started to bubble up. Yeah. So I'm confident now going into this in the summer, that thing is gonna suck in cool air, and take the hot air out. And I've mounted it to the sea, you know, or as high as I can, so it's taking out that cool air, that hot air from the top. But that was me trying to battle with condensation, and there isn't really much I can do about condensation apart from maybe, you know, look at getting a positive air, whatever it's called, you know, actually pushing air in, PI,
MVHR, heat source recovery,
that sort of thing. But I'm not, or fitting an aircon unit. Or something like that, you know. But then I'm just, you know, part of me is like, dude, I'm like, you know, it's getting expensive. It's getting expensive to turn all these things on. So I'm happy that that's working, and the extractor fan, you know, I'm just used to just having a wet door. But but yeah, it is definitely a problem, and it's something that you should definitely go into. If I could give any advice out about, you know, wanting to get into reptiles, is right now in the UK, get yourself into European species. You know, if you want to keep a lizard, you know, the same as maybe, you know, a cresty size, or, you know,
the certids.
yeah, you go down that route,
Yeah.
and you know, to the point where you can put them outside. And I actually every now and again I think like I really enjoy seeing my tortoise out in the garden, and I like the fact that my UV isn't on and my heat isn't on. So I know at that point for them couple of months, it's costing me nothing to keep that tortoise out there. And like I do look at her and go like, well, if there was a lizard living like that out there, that would be pretty cool as well. But yeah, that would be my advice. But then also, you know, if you're not going to go down that route, maybe go down the route, you know, if you're not going to go down the European route, at least try and match the stuff, you know, go if you're going to go tropical, go fully tropical for everything.
Yeah.
You know, trying to keep I'm lucky, I suppose, in a way that bearded dragons are kind of bulletproof. But if you had an animal that really didn't like humidity, obviously I've got, you know, the 6 by 5 foot tropical royal viv that I've gone down the route of. I'm pulling air out of that during the summer. You know, I'm extracting hot air out of that. The humidity in here does go up because I've got exoterras like the assassin bugs and the lion day geckos and the croc skink that are wet and damp that that are building up the humidity in here. But yeah, so definitely try and my advice would be stick to the same at least the same environments. Yeah, that would be, but you know,
the same ecological niche.
100%. And then and build. I did a video about building the shed and what I would change differently, and you know, I wouldn't do a fiberglass roof because that was the biggest stressful thing I've ever done in my life. You know, going from never doing anything, never built a shed in my life. Obviously, I know how to join two pieces of wood together with screws. You know, I'm not a master carpenter or anything, but going from that to then a 30-foot by 10-foot shed, just based off of a few YouTube videos, was a bit sort of like. Luckily, I went in there with like, you know, a load of confidence. Like, I can do this. This is fine. It's just wood. It's fine. And then when I got to doing the actual roof and doing the fiberglass ceiling, I was losing sleep over that. That was so stressful.
Yeah.
But yeah, just build stuff and do tons and tons of research and tailor it to those animals. 100%. Yeah, I'd really like to put ceiling, although it wouldn't help with my insulation problems, like my heat retention or losing heat as well, or getting hotter in the summer, like when it was 35 degrees. But I'd really like to have a lot more natural light coming through the ceiling.
Yes. Yeah.
That would be so good. Like almost like having an orangery or something, you know, like that kind of thing. But I think when it was 35 degrees, I would have really regretted having, you know, massive
windows.
So yeah,
well, I'm going to have that problem because obviously I'm in a conservatory. Thankfully it's a north facing garden, so I only get sun at the tail end of the day once it sets, and the wind, it's brick walls. It's got a couple of windows, but it's brick walls, double insulated, and then obviously it's got a glass roof, but the roof has got all the blinds on it, so I can close them if I want. But yeah, I'm not looking forward to the summer because my reptile room last year when we had the hot spells got to about 40 degrees. So I just turned everything off. But this year I'm probably going to get portable aircon unit, but then even then that dries out your room, so you're then having to spray more and you've got to be more on top of it.
That's it.
So it's a non-stop battle.
It's tough, and it's tough in the UK because our seasons are so up and down, aren't they? You know, like 35 degrees and then going down to freezing. It's like what do you do for the best? You know, you have to kind of find a middle ground, and then just luckily, you know, like we've said multiple times, everything does kind of survive. So and I would turn it off. I would turn everything off over, you know, I'd have things go cooler rather than hotter.
100%. 100%.
I did turn this place off. I don't think, did I flick it off at the fuse? I don't think I did because of my timers. I think I use a lot of manual timers in here still. And I've got quite a lot of the old digital microclimate. No, the Haberstat digital ones that the battery backups have got in them and stuff. So I just went round and just unplugged everything off of the extension lead and just left it sort of balancing on top, so I knew where everything was. But that was a stressful time. But that being said, that wasn't costing me much in electricity back then, so I would go back to them days. I'd be quite happy. It wasn't costing me £15 a day during the heat wave.
Yeah, man, it's the electric crisis. I was speaking to an American about it, and they don't have it as bad. But for those who don't know, what would have been like, I don't know, £150 a month to heat my reptiles is now like £600 a month.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we're just about reaching almost £400 a month here.
yeah,
So
I'm very fortunate that me and my girlfriend, we do okay. Like, we're neither one of us are rich, but we both have above average wage jobs. And we're both on the breadline now, let alone people. We have an expensive lifestyle. Like, my lizards cost me, it cost me like 70 quid a week just to feed them. You know, and that's without any sundry items like new bulbs or new substrates or so we have an expensive life, and I'm very fortunate that I have a job in the sense that I can work overtime and earn extra money. I've been working pretty much every Saturday for the last however long now, just because we need the money. But yeah, just quickly on the people going for European species, I've got 2 points on that because I like to play devil's advocate. Point one is get jeweled Lacertas because they're amazing.
yeah, awesome, beautiful.
There was a guy posting some babies for sale the other day, and his parents are kept outside year round. And honestly, I've never seen more beautiful lizards.
They're absolutely stunning, and
yeah,
they're always, and they're like the cheapest lizard in the reptile shop as well.
Yeah, no one wants them, which is mad because no one knows about them. So it's a hard one because all you see on YouTube are Aki monitors, bearded dragons, leopard geckos, crested geckos, and then royal pythons, corn snakes. I'm trying to think of like other common snakes, like king snakes or whatever. Then that's all people are getting into the hobby see, and then they don't realize how cool. Because this is why I don't agree with beginner species. Because let's just say little Timmy goes into the reptile shop and he wants to buy his first pet. Rightfully so, a reptile shop will negate him towards the beginner corn royal leopard gecko. But then those animals, eventually little Timmy goes, well, actually, I didn't really want this bearded dragon. I really like, I don't bloody know, a Knowles. So the bearded dragon then needs to go somewhere else. So that's why I'm not necessarily a fan of beginner species. But then I agree, you shouldn't sell little Timmy a bloody clock monitor. Like, there obviously has to be a line. So it's a hard one because if you don't want a European species, and you address both points, which I'm glad, because if you don't want a European species, then at least make sure the species that you've got in your head that you really, really want. So let's just say it's let's just say like an Abronia, because they're quite cool and they don't really want high temperatures and they want some high humidity because they're a cloud forest. So you really, really want an Abronia. You've saved up, you've done all your research, you've got an Abronia. The worst thing you can go and do now is buy like 4 bearded dragons and put them in the same room as your Abronia. So just make sure,
like Euromastics or something.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Something that's going to dry your room out because they're stupidly hot. So be sensible in that regard, because if you really want Euromastics, good example, more than you want the Abronia, then don't buy the Abronia and vice versa. But then also don't just rush into buying. Like, if I had my time again, I would have done a lot more research, and I'd already done a lot of research, and I would have done a lot more research before buying a few of the species that I have. And the problem also as well, like stuff like the peach throat and the mangrove monitor, like where's the research? Because other than researching the wild, not many people tell you how it is. So it's a hard one.
Yeah,
so it is a hard one, but definitely go for the species that you want, within reason. And even if it's not within reason, find someone that has one. For example, if you really want a mangrove monitor and you're in the UK, good luck, they're not here. But let's just say, for example, you want a mangrove monitor. If you're close to Surrey, like, come over, deal with mine for a day, and I guarantee you won't want one. Like, I guarantee you. Like, you just, but YouTube doesn't promote.
You don't see that side of it.
No.
No.
You see the good.
Pretty lizard in a box. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It's so yeah, just do your research on the species that you want, but especially if you're here in the UK, look into rescues, look on places of people that are rehoming animals, support ethical breeders, don't support immoral shops or breeders, because there are a fair share of shops out there that I don't know how they're still running.
No, definitely not. And I'd say if you go to a shop, one of my favourite shops and one of my favourite reptile people is Mark Amy. We're good friends. We go back years and years and years. And I worked for a little bit in his shop, and I always used to hang around in the shop and stuff like that. And anyone who went in there got to grill him. You know, if you went in there and you wanted to buy an animal, you got to grill him. And don't be offended by that. Like that's a responsible shop. If they're grilling you and asking you all the questions, and I don't know if it's as common anymore, but he used to. I know he doesn't run the shop anymore. Carl does, and Carl's awesome as well. But
Is that the one that's near Uxbridge direction?
it's in Bovingdons over
That's
by
it, yeah,
in Hertfordshire.
I know
not
it 'cause-
Hempstead.
Yeah, my mum grew up 20 minutes down the road, so I know the shop. So yeah, small
That's it.
world, but I know the
Yeah,
shop.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. I used to go out my way, you know. It was like 2 hours
Yeah,
out my
for
way
you,
to go
for
down
Essex.
there.
Yeah.
I used to work that way, so if I was like within like 45 minutes of that shop,
You
in the
were
opposite
going.
direction,
Yeah.
I was going that way.
Yeah.
Back before we were getting tracked and stuff. Yeah, I used to. That he used to be able to buy like a little corn snake book. It was always a corn snake for a kid. It was a corn snake.
Yeah.
And but they were cool back then, you know. Like they were a cool animal.
They're still cool. They're cool now.
They are cool animals. I
They're
mean,
just
I've got
not glorified. Yeah.
exactly. But you used to be able to buy this book, and it would tell you how to keep a corn snake. And they used to say like, come back in, read the book, come back in. So you've already thought about that snake now for like, you know, a week or something. You've got in the weekend. You're going at the next weekend after that. He'll ask you some questions about that care based on what you've read in that book, and then he'll sell you the snake and the setup, but then minus the price of the book.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's awesome. You know, that's responsible. Whereas, you know, I've been in some shops and seen, you know, iguanas for 50 quid and and water monitors being sold to children. You know,
Mate, the shop, or anyone that's been to the shop will know exactly which shop it is, and I won't name the shop, but I also don't care. They say it's a female Salvador, right? So a croc monitor. But the thing's 6-ish foot and it's got big old hemipenal bulges, but that's by the by. It's in, so let's just say it's 6 foot for the story. The lizard's 6 foot long with a lot of its tail, admittedly like 3 and a bit foot, that's going to be tail, but still it's in a 7 foot tall, maybe 3 by 3, like 3 wide, 3 deep, 7 tall. The lizard's 6 foot long, so it can't even have half of its body either way.
Yeah.
And okay, fine, it's small, but like we said earlier, at least the enclosure's decked out. Oh wait, no, it's not. There's one branch that goes up the wall. That's it, and they've got one mercury vapor lamp on the other side of the enclosure. One to generate a heat spot and a burn mark. Okay, fine. Oh wait, no, the lizard can't even get to the mercury vapor because the log's on the bloody other side of the enclosure. At least it's got decent LEDs. Oh wait, no LEDs. Oh, at least it's got decent UVB. Oh, there's a T8, like, you know, like you get the T8 and they're like this because like
hanging by the wires or something. Yeah.
Like I literally walked in there to see it. Because obviously I'm a monitor guy, I love monitors. I walked in, I saw it, and I walked instantly out. And how I wasn't sick, like just I literally walked in there, like shook my head, and then walked out. And I was like, that's disgusting.
I've got a shop round here. It's my local shop. Now there is only one reptile shop in Norwich, so I ain't gonna. Well, you've got Scape Nature, but there is a dedicated reptile shop in Norwich. And I should be friends with them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, we should be friends.
You're the Norwich reptile guy.
Like, I should be like, man, this is cool. This is cool. I hate it. And I at the time it was the only. I now have to drive sort of 30 minutes out my way instead of 2 minutes. I could walk there. I drive 30 minutes out my way to buy a £5 bag of chicks, just because I don't want to go in there. And like, you know, there is that whole mentality of the reptiles are temporarily in there, but in my mind, they're temporarily in there, but also you should be inspiring people. You know, there are good shops out there that are keeping animals, even if they're just temporarily keeping them in there. They're keeping them there well. and you're
Yeah.
inspiring them keepers to do that. And that's, you know, what that brushes back on what we said earlier, when, you know, you walk into a reptile shop and you wonder why people are just keeping animals in boxes with aspen, because that's the first thing you see when you walk into the reptile shop, and that's what you see them being
Yeah.
kept on and sold. So why would you do anything different? Why would you go to B&Q and buy a bag of topsoil?
Yeah.
Yeah, annoyingly, there's good and bad. I think that's the theme of this podcast, isn't it? Good and bad.
Well, this is it. I think, where do we start? Around 7:30ish. So we're coming into the 2 hour mark. So we'll wrap up. Is there anything you want to touch on? Anything at all? Either ask me or something that you wanted to talk about that we can talk about, because I don't care how long it goes on for. I just don't want to take up too much of your time.
No, I'll be honest with you, mate. I think I'm happy with what we've spoke about. And if I've got any more we should speak about, maybe we should do it again soon.
Yeah,
I'm fully
100%.
up for
I'd love to have you back
don't want
on.
to get all my questions out right now. All my you don't want to prise too far into my brain. So yeah, no, I'm happy with that, man. I mean, we could do another podcast in the future about, because obviously me and you, I would imagine we get through soil. I get asked a lot about soil. That seems to be the biggest thing, is making bioactive soil, or making naturalistic soil. And I try and very much show it on my channel that it's not an art. You know, it's a big bucket, and I mix just loads of stuff together, and I just generally get the consistency. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about all that in a future video, mate, and plants and things like that. So,
I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to have you back on. But yeah, I'm sorry, everyone. That was just a bit of a rant, but this isn't. I don't script. I say this in every podcast. So anyone who's watched my podcast, sorry, but I basically set out on doing a podcast purely because, like, for so long I'd see animals in bad condition, reptiles monitors, and I just wanted to be the voice of reason, in the sense of not attacking people. So I put myself out there, and then I wanted to start. So that's why I got on, like, YouTube and Instagram. And then I thought about doing a podcast. I wanted to do the podcast because none of my friends like reptiles. So I'm sort of one and known. So I wanted to get reptile people on and just nerd out about reptiles and have conversations with people who are like-minded to myself. And then I thought, well, if I can put it on YouTube, and then, like you say, if one person goes, oh, look at those enclosures behind him, like, I would love to have something like that, then it is worth it, because
100%.
It's very easy to get caught up in numbers on YouTube and being like, oh, I don't get enough views, or this, that, and the other. And I do it, and I'm sure everyone does it. And it's very easy to get wrapped up into negative comments. You get a million comments saying, great enclosures, great help. One person comments going, this is shit. And you go, oh, God, I'm such a mess of a human.
Yeah.
But the way when I was watching videos on how to become a YouTuber, and I literally watched like 6 months worth of, like, how to podcast and how to YouTube. And if 20 people watched your videos, and it was only 20 people, you think, oh, Jesus, that's not a lot of views. But then if 20 people turned up into, like, the Norwich Reptile Shed, or I don't have a name for this, but Paul's Monitors, 20 people is a lot of people to have in here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one of my videos went viral the other day and got like 820,000 views.
Yeah.
And I can't even comprehend that. Like,
no,
820,000 people have watched a mangrove monitor chase me.
Was it a short? Was it because the shorts go nuts, didn't they?
It was just it was on Instagram, but yeah, my most viewed short, I think it's like 35,000 or 25,000. And my Instagram, I've got a few 50, 60,000, and then I hit one at 820 odd thousand.
Yeah.
Just randomly out of nowhere.
It is random. Yeah.
Well, this is it. I basically take out the science, and I just post a video, put a trending audio, and that's me done.
That's it. Yeah.
That's literally all I do.
I sort of laugh because, you know, I'll spend half a day changing all the angles and cutting, like, I've said this to Liam, I chose possibly the most useful but the hardest channel, like the hardest reptile related content to film, because building stuff while filming it and talking about it is really hard. Like, everything takes twice as long, but I'll spend an entire day, like the 4x2x2 build, that was a lot of like at camera angles and talking and cutting and marking and speaking about every single part of it. And that gets, like, you know, I'm not saying these numbers are nothing, but that might get a few thousand views. And then I'll film 15-second video of my croc skink eating a rack swim off my hand, and it'll do 3,000 views in 15 minutes. I'm like, what's
Yeah.
going on? Why am I doing something wrong?
It's
Why am I
disheartening.
putting so much effort into these
Yeah.
ones? But then I wouldn't get as much satisfaction out of knowing that, you know, a lot of people now know how to build a 4x2x2 vivarium on one sheet of plywood for 40 quid. So
Well, there you go. It's the thing. Like, I have 2 wrap-up questions at the end of every podcast. We're going. You've already answered one, which is what advice would you give to a reptile keeper? So you only have one wrap-up question at the end of the podcast. But yeah, like I said, I only discovered your channel a couple of months ago. And I think as people, and especially as men, it's hard to sort of praise people and give each other compliments because obviously, like, we're men and we're big and tough and strong. But I really appreciate. Again, I'm not someone to blow smoke up people's asses. I just wouldn't say. But I really appreciate the effort you do go into because I'll be honest, I'm not a snake guy, and I only discovered you because of a tortoise, and then now I watch all of your stuff. But I can only imagine somebody who's just getting their first snake and they're curious on DIY, or they're curious on enrichment, or they're curious on, like, they're probably sat watching the big YouTubers and seeing all these royals in racks, and then all of a sudden your channel's recommended, and you spark that level of, like, curiosity, and then what will become passion in someone. And even if you've only done it for one royal outside of your 2, you have helped one snake live
definitely.
its best life. And for me, I think it's so easy to get caught, myself included, it's so easy to get caught up on the numbers. But you have to remember, like, if you help one person a year, which you definitely will do, you know what I mean? But that's one person that you've helped benefit their animals. Like, if this podcast only gets 20 views, but out of that 20 views, one person comes away and goes, that's amazing, then
it's worthwhile.
Hopefully you've enjoyed my time. I've definitely enjoyed yours.
Yeah, definitely, of course.
So it in my head, because I'm such a nerd for time management, because you don't get time back. Once time's gone, it's gone. You know what I mean? It's finite. Like, no matter what happens in life, you don't get time back. Like, one day, again, being spiritual, my day is written. One day I'm going to die. I'll pass on to the next plane or whatever I do. But long story short, once you're dead, you're dead, and you can't get that time back. Money you can make again. Animals, they die, you don't replace them, but you can get other animals. Like, I got divorced, I'm in another happy relationship where I'm even more, like, I say another happy relationship, I obviously wasn't in a happy relationship to start, but I'm in a happy, you know what I mean? You can replace pretty much everything in life to a degree, to a level. All the stuff's materialism, it's all facades. But time, you can't get it back. So for me, I'm very crucial on time, and I've enjoyed this time. And the way I see it is, it's a worthwhile time of my time, hopefully of your time. And if we can, someone driving to work or someone in the reptile room cleaning, and by us sacrificing our time, hopefully we've inspired others. And for me, that's all you can do. You know what I mean? Like, because like we've said in this podcast, people aren't making the content that you're making. People aren't showing royal, more so your royal, but like even your Taiwanese and your pine snake. I'm looking at their enclosures now. Like, you don't see those enclosures. You might see that sort of enclosure for an Aki monitor or a Timor monitor, or like a green tree python, like those prestigious animals. But your everyday species who deserve love too, you don't see that, and you promote that, and you do it in the sense of, like, realism, in the sense of, this is how it is. It's not glorified. Sometimes it's shit. Sometimes it's really good. But at the end of the day, you're doing it for the love of the animals. And I can only appreciate you for spending all that time making a video on how to make a 4x2x2 viv. Because you've helped people. Man. You know what I mean? You've helped people. So you should, like, I really enjoy your content. And I find, as people, as reptile keepers, the more I've got into the hobby, and the more in the sense of social media, and I've spoken to people, so many people now watch small creators because they find the big ones. Once you get more into the hobby, you find the big ones are just too sensationalized. So they drift to people like you or I, where we're just real guys. Like, we're not trying to be anybody else. We're trying to be ourselves, and just trying to show off your snakes, and I'm trying to show off my lizards. And I've spoken to a couple of people saying that you're coming on my podcast, and they were like, oh yeah, he's great. Like, his channel's sick.
Awesome.
So you're like, this is in the monitor realm.
Yeah,
And-
that's awesome. Yeah,
and
so
peop-
good to hear.
and people are liking your stuff. So keep it up, man. I like,
Thanks, man.
like I say, we've got the last wrap up question, but if there's any, and we'll talk afterwards because we can bitch about that guy. But all jokes aside, is there anything else you want to touch on before I hit you with the last wrap up question?
No, hit me with the question, man. I'm ready. I'm ready
Okay.
for it.
So the two questions are obviously, what advice would you give a new reptile keeper, which you answered beautifully.
Mhm.
And the last one is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received, not reptile related?
Cool, not reptile related. Wow.
So
Wow, that's a
it doesn't have to be deep, but mine's quite deep because I'm a man who
Go on,
suffers. I'm a man who
you give me
suffers
yours
with
while I think
depression.
about mine.
So mine's deep because I'm a man who suffers depression and I'm spiritual. So mine at the moment is, sometimes you find yourself in a dark place, but always remember that seeds have to be planted in order to grow. And I like that because 2 years ago, I found myself in a very dark hole. I need to plug my laptop in. I found myself in a very dark hole, but now I'm not there yet, but I'm starting to blossom into a beautiful flower. So
Lovely.
yeah, very deep shit. Doesn't have to be as deep as that. But yeah, just best piece of advice, or first piece of advice that comes into your head.
Oh man, not many people have given me too much advice that I've taken on board. Maybe it's because I just don't know many advicey people.
Is your like your parents or grandparents never instilled any wisdom on you once upon a moon?
Cool. I bet they wish, right, if they were listening now, I bet they'd be shouting some stuff, but
Pay attention in school.
pay attention in school. Cool. You stumped me. There we go. We can rub it about reptiles for 2 hours, but you stumped me on the old my life. I don't know what that means about me.
We can dive into that on another podcast.
I'm sure someone has said to me at some point, be kind. Be kind to everyone. Be kind to animals. That's my philosophy. Yeah, and that probably translates to the way I keep my reptiles as well. So let's go for that. An old guy once told me to be kind to everything. Yeah.
I mean, you're not wrong. And it's, again,
No.
if, with the whole compassion of side of it, if you see someone keeping an animal really, really, really badly, just remember, if you were in their shoes, you would do the exact same. So be kind.
Yeah.
Approach them kindly, and then they might just listen, and you can.
Yeah, definitely.
Because we don't do it for the people, because I don't know about you, but I don't really like people because I think people are arrogant twats.
I don't like reptile people, to be honest with you, mate.
Well, there you go. So I only do this for the animals, and I do it to try and benefit animals.
Yeah.
And when I say I don't like people, people always get so offended by that, and I'm like, well, that's just a sign of your narcissism. But
No, yeah, definitely, man. No, I'm the same. When the 2 meter rule came in, I loved it. It was a great time.
You're like, oh no, I don't have to go outside.
Oh, I can shout at you now, like perfectly fine. It's perfectly okay to shout at you for standing close to me. Go away.
Yeah, to be fair, I think a lot of reptile people we are hermits in our own right. A lot of us are introverted, and we find a lot of love and passion and peace and tranquility in our reptiles, which I think is even more important. Why it's even more important to keep your animals the way that you keep yours, just so you can really find that inner peace and beauty with walking into your reptile enclosures, room, shed, bedroom, wherever you have them, and seeing your animal in a way that you would never see it before. Makes it all worthwhile. Yeah,
definitely. That's beautiful. Should we end it on that?
Yeah, man. We'll wrap it up. Again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
I'll put all your links and everything in the description. If everyone, I mean, you've got more followers than me on YouTube, so people are probably coming from you to me. So thank you for that. But yeah, I appreciate your time. Keep up the great work, man. And I can't wait to see what's coming.
Cheers, mate. And we'll see you soon.
No worries. Cheers, guys.
Bye.
All right.